Chapter 971. Blood Soul Tree. Looking at the mid-stage sovereign youth that was instantly blasted into smithereens, the other cultivators sucked in a breath of cold air. It seemed like this heavenly sovereign was a genuine heavenly sovereign expert. In other words, Zhuowen was indeed in the hands of this heavenly sovereign. He didn't cheat at all to pass through the heavenly sovereign Iron Man cave. After recovering from their shock, everyone in the open space fell into silence. Cheng Dong turned around and said to everyone in a clear voice, "Now, only you are left. If you do not wish to take the test, you can also give up. I, Cheng Dong, will not make things difficult for you." Everyone looked at each other and actually chose to forfeit. Their cultivation and strength were the weakest, so they didn't have any confidence in passing through the Iron Man cave. Therefore, they simply forfeited. Looking at over 200 people who chose to forfeit, Cheng Dong's eyes revealed a trace of disappointment. He knew that the martial path of these 200 people would end here. Although the martial path placed great importance on aptitude and talent, perseverance and unyielding qualities were more important than aptitude. If one chose to yield in the face of difficulties, then if one could yield once, they could yield a second time. By accumulating experience, one's spine would eventually be bent. Only those who were unyielding and unyielding, even if the road ahead was filled with difficulties and thorns, would be able to reach higher achievements. Aptitude was only determined by one's birth. It only made one's path smoother and had a higher starting point than others. But if one didn't have an unyielding and courageous character, what was the use of having a higher starting point? In the end, one would only be at the starting point because one didn't have the courage to step out and walk on the thorny road. However, this was their choice. Although Cheng Dong felt that it was a pity, he didn't force them. He only arranged for the remaining 200 people to be sent out of the main city. Then he rushed towards the exit of the Iron Man cave. In the deep passageway, a ghost-like figure continuously passed through, after which, it suddenly stopped at a corner. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The moment the figure stopped, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out. Soon after, from the barrier at the corner, arrow shadows flew out. The cold light was piercing and bone-chilling. The figure coldly snorted, and a powerful mental energy gushed out, forming a solid mental energy barrier around his body. Clang, clang. Countless arrows that emitted a cold glint landed on the spiritual barrier. It was as if they had fallen into a swamp, and all of them froze. Then, under the control of this person, these arrows flew in the opposite direction and pierced into the rock wall. This is already the 5th wave of arrows. There are arrow traps at every corner of this tunnel. The person stopped and said with a cold gaze. Upon closer inspection, this person was tall and slender with a fair complexion. He was around 20 years old, and was none other than Zhuowen, who had entered the celestial worthy Iron Man cave. After entering the Iron Man cave, Zhuowen found that the structure of the Iron Man cave was extremely complicated, and there were countless branches. Therefore, after entering the Iron Man cave, Zhuowen randomly chose a branch and directly rushed in. He knew very well that the Iron Man cave was constructed this way mainly to prevent the geniuses who had worked hard to enter the Iron Man cave from bumping into each other. Otherwise, if they were to fight over resources, it would be easy for both sides to suffer. Moreover, from the 4 old men's words, Zhuowen could also guess that there should be a lot of resources in the Iron Man cave. Therefore, he mainly relied on his own luck to obtain them. However, because Zhuowen had entered the Heavenly Sovereign's Iron Man cave, there were only 4 people among the 30,000 who could enter the Heavenly Sovereign's Iron Man cave. They were Yin Zhongyang, Palm Master, Yuan Zhao and Zhuowen. Therefore, relatively speaking, Zhuowen's chances of encountering other cultivators in the cave were very low. At that time, the cave was filled with traps and Zhuowen had to be careful. After all, not long after entering, he had already encountered 5 waves of arrow traps. He did not know what other traps were waiting for him. Before entering the Iron Man cave, the 4 old men did not seem to mention a time limit. In other words, you don't have to leave too early. You can search for more resources in here. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly sounded in Zhuowen's mind, causing him to nod. After 4 hours of walking, Zhuowen finally walked out of the endless tunnel and arrived at a rather spacious stone hall. What surprised Zhuo was that the ceiling of the rather spacious stone hall was actually open air. Intense white light seeped out from the ceiling, causing the stone hall to appear rather bright. In the center of the stone hall was a towering tree. The tree was so thick that it would take 10 people to wrap their arms around it. Its thick roots were exposed to the soil, and the tree gave off an extremely dense presence of life. What a dense presence of life! Just what is this towering tree? Stepping into the stone hall, Zhuo stared at the towering tree in front of him. A sliver of caution appeared on his face. I don't know either. Go take a look. However, the presence of life within the tree is extremely dense. Perhaps there's something good inside, Xiao He said cautiously. Hearing this, Zhuo nodded. He slowly approached the towering tree in the center of the stone hall. Furthermore, Zhuo discovered that the closer he got to the center of the stone hall, the denser the presence of life emitted by the towering tree. At the same time, Zhuo also felt more relaxed and happy. Attracted by the presence of life, he couldn't help but quicken his pace. There must be something good inside. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to emit such a dense presence of life. Zhuo's eyes were blazing as he muttered to himself. After a while, Zhuo arrived at the roots of the towering tree. At this moment, Zhuo discovered that the roots of the towering tree were actually pulsating above the soil, just like the blood vessels of a human. These roots are quite strange. They can actually pulsate continuously. Could it be that there's blood inside just like a human? Zhuo said with some astonishment. Kid, this dragon lord knows what this thing is. Hurry up and run. This is not something good. I really didn't think that there would be something like this in the Iron Man cave. Just as Zhuo was feeling rather curious about the strange roots of the towering tree, Xiao He suddenly shouted. His voice was filled with vigilance and surprise, as if he had seen something terrifying. Zhuo was startled. He felt that Xiao He's behavior was rather strange. He hurriedly asked, Xiao He, what's the matter with you being so flustered? What is the origin of this towering tree? Kid, don't bother about the origin of this tree. Hurry up and run. This is called the blood soul tree. It is an evil plant that specializes in sucking the blood and souls of living creatures. Once a human comes close, this thing will open its fangs like a cat that has smelled blood. Just as Xiao He finished speaking, a strange muffled sound came from the towering tree. Then, the originally quiet towering tree changed drastically. 2 blood-red pupils grew out of the trunk, and the green leaves on the branches turned into bloody human heads. Whoosh! 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 Before Zhuo could even react, the pulsating roots under his feet rushed out and surrounded Zhuo. In an instant, Zhuo was enveloped. The moment Zhuo was submerged by the countless roots, another figure walked out from another passage. This person's eyes were filled with arrogance. It was the crown prince of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty, Yin Zhongyang. Blood Soul Tree. Why is there such a thing in the Iron Man cave? Looking at the strange tree full of human heads, Yin Zhongyang's expression changed slightly. However, he did not approach the Blood Soul Tree. Even if it was him, if he was entangled by the Blood Soul Tree, he would have to pay a great price to escape. He did not want to take the risk. Looking at the Blood Soul Tree's form, I'm afraid it has caught its prey. I wonder which unlucky fellow dared to approach such an evil plant. He must be courting death. Yin Zhongyang's eyes flickered. Then he slowly retreated and disappeared into the passage. Looking at the countless roots that were entangled around him, Zhuo frowned slightly. He did not expect that the towering tree, that looked full of vitality, was actually such an evil blood soul tree. Great Sun Nirvana Law. 8 times Azura Blood Spear Force. Zhuo snorted coldly. In an instant, he transformed into his 4-headed 8-armed form. Then, 8 spears appeared in his hands. At the same time, he displayed 8 Azura Blood Spear Force. Terrifying power crushed out, and the surrounding space was crushed. Puffed. In an instant, the countless roots that surrounded Zhuo were torn into pieces by the tremendous power. Bright red blood spurted out from the roots. The roots of the blood soul tree were like human blood vessels. There was bright red blood in them. After tearing apart the roots, Zhuo took a step forward and instantly flew out of the encirclement of the countless roots. Then he displayed the Azura Blood Spear Force. The blood that spurted out from the roots was immediately absorbed by Zhuowen's spear force, turning into a sea of blood. "You are my food. Don't go." An indistinct voice came from the Blood Soul tree. Soon after, countless branches on the Blood Soul tree drilled out. At the end of the branches were human heads with long tongues sticking out as they rushed towards Zhuowen. It was an extremely strange sight. Zhuowen's gaze was chilling. His 8 arms continued to display the power of the Azura blood spear. Suddenly, the human heads and branches on the Blood Soul tree were all cut down by Zhuowen's long spear. However, the branches of the Blood Soul tree seemed to be endless. After one branch was cut off, there were countless more branches that came one after the other. Zhuowen's face turned ugly. Fortunately, in his 4-headed 8-armed form, Zhuowen could observe his surroundings very carefully. There were no blind spots. He was able to withstand the attack of the countless human head branches. Chapter 972. Blood Soul Tree's Core. This Blood Soul tree is so thick. Who knows how many living beings' blood and souls it has absorbed? Who knows how powerful and terrifying its vitality is? If you want to fight a battle of attrition with it, you are simply courting death. Xiao He sneered. Zhuowen's eyelids twitched. He said through voice transmission, "Everything has a weakness. It's impossible that this Blood Soul tree doesn't have a weakness, right?" Of course it has a weakness. The main trunk of the Blood Soul tree contains a blood-red core. That thing is the core power of the Blood Soul tree. All the energy is extracted from the blood-red core. Xiao Hei's voice became extremely solemn. He said, "Looking at the trunk of the Blood Soul tree, it has probably lived for hundreds of years. It will be very difficult for you to get close to the Blood Soul tree. Since it's very difficult, let's break out of the encirclement and leave this place." Zhuowen nodded and said solemnly, "Sai, don't you want the blood-red core of the Blood Soul tree? The core contains extremely powerful vitality. It is a holy medicine for healing. As long as you don't die, you can rely on the vitality of the core to recover." Xiao He suddenly smiled. Zhuowen glared at Xiao He and said, "The one you really want is yourself, right? You actually didn't forget to pull me up." Xiao He scratched his head and chuckled. "Not entirely. The vitality of the Blood Soul tree's core is useless to me. However, other than the vitality, there are also the souls of many living beings that the Blood Soul tree has absorbed over the years. Those souls have been refined into surging soul energy by the Blood Soul tree. They are great nourishment for a spiritual body." At this point, Black's small eyes emitted a dazzling light. However, this caused Zhuowen to look at him with disdain. Xiao He always spoke in a dignified manner, as if everything was for Zhuowen's sake. In fact, he wanted it but could not bring himself to ask for it. He could only use such an excuse. However, Zhuowen did not expose him. Xiao He was right. The surging vitality of the Blood Soul tree's core was indeed very beneficial to him. "Core, I would like to see how the Blood Soul tree can stop me, Zhuowen." As Zhuowen spoke, he suddenly took a step forward. He had 4 heads and 8 arms, and he held 8 weapons in each hand. His entire body was enveloped in a sea of blood. He looked like an Azura that had walked out of hell, as he instantly rushed towards the main trunk of the Blood Soul tree. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Perhaps sensing Zhuowen's intentions, the Blood Soul tree let out a shrill cry. Tens of thousands of heads and branches rushed towards Zhuo, when without any regard for their lives. They completely surrounded Zhuowen, not allowing him to get close at all. Swoosh, swoosh. There were too many branches in the surroundings. Even though Zhuowen had 4 heads and 8 arms, it was still extremely difficult for him to deal with them. This time, the Blood Soul tree's attack was dozens of times stronger than before. Divine Sun Cauldron. Come out. Greater Limitless Sword Formation, block it. Helpless, Zhuowen used the Divine Sun Cauldron and the Greater Limitless Sword Formation in order to block the numerous branches around him. However, as time passed, Zhuowen realized that even the Divine Sun Cauldron and the Greater Limitless Sword Formation were unable to block it. They began to totter. This Blood Soul tree is so terrifying. Zhuowen's face was slightly pale as he said gloomily, "Kid, since we're already at this stage, don't hold back anymore. Hurry up and use the bedevilment power," Xiao He said anxiously. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. This Blood Soul tree was indeed very difficult to deal with. If Zhuowen did not use the bedevilment power, it would really be difficult to break through. Boom! A terrifying demonic aura surged out. Following that, Zhuowen retracted his 4 heads and 8 arms. A thick blood aura began to surge out from his body. Following that, his black hair turned blood red, and his black pupils turned blood red. Zhuowen entered the bedevilment state and used the power of the first layer of the demonic path. His aura instantly rose to an extremely terrifying level. The aura of the demonic path of massacre spread throughout the entire stone hall. Under the influence of this terrifying demonic path of massacre, the originally rampant human head branches actually stopped for a moment. Slash! Zhuowen roared angrily and waved the blood-red spear in his hand. Countless blood-red spear shadows spread out, and the tens of thousands of heads and branches in the surroundings were all turned into clouds of blood mist under the attack of these spear shadows. A sharp scream spread throughout the entire stone hall. This was the painful howl of the Blood Soul Tree. With just one spear, the surrounding human head branches that were sweeping towards the Blood Soul Tree were annihilated. After Zhuowen entered the bedevilment state, his strength skyrocketed to a terrifying level. It was so terrifying that even the Blood Soul Tree began to fear him. After breaking through the surrounding branches, Zhuowen continued to rush towards the main trunk of the Blood Soul Tree. Although there were branches and vines blocking his way from time to time, Zhuowen had already entered the bedevilment state. He would kill anyone who stood in his way. The originally tough human head branches were no different from paper in front of Zhuowen. Swoosh! In an instant, Zhuowen arrived in front of the main trunk. At that moment, the originally lush Blood Soul Tree was now bare. The flourishing human head branches were almost all cut off by Zhuowen. Only the bare main trunk was left. Woo-woo! Spare my life. At that moment, the Blood Soul Tree became weak. Its voice was filled with fear. The human in front of it was too terrifying. Its strength was not very strong at first. It was besieged by his branches and was forced to retreat. However, for some unknown reason, the human in front of it suddenly emitted a terrifying demonic aura. In an instant, all the human head branches were cut off. Now only the bare main trunk was left. It had no choice but to beg for mercy. Otherwise, it would definitely die. Hand over the heart core and I will spare your life, Zhuowen said indifferently. Woo-woo. The heart core is the essence of my life. If it is taken away, I will not be able to live for long, the Blood Soul Tree said hesitantly. Hand it over and you can live for a while. If you don't, you will die immediately, Zhuowen said coldly. The main trunk of the Blood Soul Tree twisted. Its crimson eyes were filled with pleading and fear. It even nodded its head continuously, in a very human-like manner. It begged for mercy in a low voice, asking Zhuowen not to take away the heart core. Pfft! Zhuowen swung his crimson spear and stabbed it into the main trunk of the Blood Soul Tree. Immediately blood spurted out. Then the Blood Soul Tree kept wailing. I will count to 3. If you don't hand it over, you will not have any chance, Zhuowen said indifferently. The Blood Soul Tree frowned. Its crimson eyes were filled with hesitation. Zhuowen's method was very decisive. It had to hand it over even if it did not want to. 1. 2. At this point, the demonic aura on Zhuowen's body became even more intense. The Blood Soul Tree trembled under the pressure. It knew that if it did not hand over the heart core, the human in front of it would really kill it. 3. At the count of 3, the murderous intent in Zhuowen's eyes was so intense that it became tangible. Roar! The moment Zhuowen said 3, the Blood Soul Tree let out a shrill cry, and a crystal-clear blood-red hexahedron flew out. It flew in the other direction, heading towards a corridor on the left. Zhuowen did not expect the Blood Soul Tree to suddenly throw out the heart core. He was not confident at all. Whoosh! The heart core of the Blood Soul Tree? A figure rushed out from the corridor again. Then with a wave of his right hand, he caught the heart core in his hand. He could not help but exclaim in surprise. This person was Yin Zhongyang, who had returned. Originally, he had returned to see who the person trapped in the Blood Soul Tree was. What happened after that? Yin Zhongyang knew that other than him, there were only Palm Tree from the Myriad Sword sect, and Yuan Zhao from the Alcate Sacred Dynasty, in the Heavenly Honorable Iron Man Cave. He had returned to see who it was between the two of them. He did not expect to obtain the heart core of the blood soul tree for nothing. Whoosh! Zhuowen came in front of Yin Zhongyang. His crimson eyes stared coldly at Yin Zhongyang and said, "Return the heart core of the blood soul tree to me." Yin Zhongyang slowly raised his head and stared indifferently at Zhuowen. He unceremoniously put the heart core into his spirit ring and said indifferently, "Who are you?" "This heart core of the blood soul tree fell into my hands of its own accord. How did it become yours, and you want me to return it to you?" Although Yin Zhongyang said this, he frowned slightly in his heart. He had never seen this strange young man with crimson hair and crimson eyes before him. He was sure that this young man was not among the 30,000 people who had taken the test. Moreover, this young man with crimson hair had an extremely terrifying demonic aura. He was actually a rare demonic cultivator. However, Yin Zhongyang was sure that this demonic cultivator was not among the 30,000 people who had taken the test. But how did this demonic cultivator sneak into the heavenly honorable Iron Man cave? "You're not giving it to me?" Zhuowen said indifferently. The killing intent in his eyes became even more intense. It was as if it had materialized. "What? You still want to snatch it? A mere middle-stage supreme being ant dares to be arrogant in front of me? So what if you're a demonic cultivator? Your cultivation is much lower than mine." Yin Zhongyang's eyes were filled with arrogance, especially when he felt the intense killing intent in Zhuowen's eyes. Yin Zhongyang was a little angry. This fellow actually dared to show such intense killing intent to him. If the crimson-haired demonic cultivator in front of him was also a heavenly honorable, Yin Zhongyang might really be afraid. However, the former was only a middle-stage supreme being, so Yin Zhongyang did not really care. "Die." Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He spat out a single word and immediately made his move. The crimson spear in his hand was held horizontally. Boundless blood energy gathered and transformed into a gigantic crimson spear shadow that was almost 1,000 feet long. It enveloped Yin Zhongyang below. Yin Zhongyang snorted coldly. He stretched out his right hand into the void and transformed it into a claw. He clawed fiercely. Instantly, a blue energy gushed out from his body. It was like a vast ocean that surrounded his body. Finally, it transformed into a gigantic blue whale. Blue whale submersion. The coldness in Yin Zhongyang's eyes intensified. The blue whale that was formed by the energy in front of him roared. It suddenly rose up and swept towards the falling crimson spear. Rumble! The crimson spear and the blue whale collided. Then, as if time had stopped, they stopped in midair. The crimson and blue energy radiance filled the entire stone hall. It was as if the surroundings had turned into a strange crimson world. Demonic sect. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He used a move from the demonic sect's secret technique that the demon Taoist had given him. Instantly, a terrifying demonic slaughter energy gushed out and transformed into a strange and powerful crimson demonic figure in front of Zhuowen. The gigantic demonic figure took a step forward and smashed its huge fist into the blue whale's body. Rumble! Chapter 973. Poseidon's halberd boom. The gigantic blood-red demonic figure was unforgiving. It instantly reached the deep pit below and grabbed the struggling blue whale. Then it pulled with both hands. With a tearing sound, the gigantic blue whale was torn into countless blue specks of light. Thump! 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 Yin Zhongyang took a few steps back. His face darkened as he looked at the torn blue whale. He was shocked. This demonic cultivator was so strong that the blue whale was destroyed just like that? Hand over the core. Floating in front of the blood-red figure, Zhuowen's scarlet eyes were still as cold and emotionless as before. A terrifying demonic Tao of slaughter spread out. Even Yin Zhongyang felt a trace of fear. "Do you think you can defeat me just because you destroyed the blue whale submerged sea? I will let you know the difference between a heavenly venerate and a sovereign." Yin Zhongyang snorted coldly and stomped his foot once more. The sea of blue energy around him surged forward like a long blue dragon, heading straight for Zhuowen. At the same time, Yin Zhongyang flicked his finger, and a blue trident appeared in his hand. The moment the trident appeared, the surging ocean seemed to become extremely excited and turbulent. It was as if the blue trident could control the surrounding ocean. "You should be proud that you forced me to use the Poseidon's halberd as a mere sovereign." The arrogance in Yin Zhongyang's eyes became even more intense. He raised his chin high and stepped on the surface of the ocean like a sea god commanding the ocean. A royal tier spiritual treasure? Zhuowen narrowed his eyes, but the corners of his mouth were filled with a cold smile as he said, "Is it that great?" As he spoke, terrifying flames of the sun burst out from Zhuowen's body. The divine sun cauldron rose behind Zhuowen like a scorching sun, and turned into a thick wall of fire in front of him, blocking the surging ocean. "You also have a royal tier spiritual treasure? Looks like your background isn't ordinary. But so what? You're still not my match." Yin Zhongyang was startled at first, but soon his face was filled with arrogance. Although Zhuowen's battle strength wasn't bad, he was still a sovereign. There was a difference of 2 realms between them. Yin Zhongyang didn't think that Zhuowen would be his match. Boom! 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 In an instant, the ocean and the sun's flames collided. The sky above the stone hall was half ocean, and half was flames. It looked extremely strange. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He stomped his foot, and instantly rushed towards Yin Zhongyang. Yin Zhongyang was an extremely conceited person. No matter how strong Zhuowen was, he didn't think that Zhuowen was his match. Since that was the case, Zhuowen wanted to ruthlessly strike a blow at Yin Zhongyang, and let him know that the little bit of pride in his heart was actually very pitiful and laughable. Yin Zhongyang naturally saw Zhuowen, who had taken the initiative to rush over. The corners of his mouth were filled with a cold smile. Yin Zhongyang swung the trident in his hand. His entire body was surrounded by seawater as he similarly rushed towards Zhuowen. Bang! The blood spear and the trident instantly collided, creating clusters of sparks. The sound of metal clashing continuously rang out. A terrifying energy spread out, and the surrounding space seemed to collapse. Looks like you're quite strong. But that's not enough. Yin Zhongyang frowned slightly. Zhuowen's strength had somewhat exceeded his expectations. However, he didn't show it verbally, and continued to act high and mighty. Zhuowen sneered again and again. How could he not have seen the change in Yin Zhongyang's expression just now? He exerted force with both hands, and the blood spear let out a buzzing sound. Then, Zhuowen's spear suddenly changed, and it actually began to spin fiercely. It drilled through the gap between the trident, and stabbed towards Yin Zhongyang's heart. Yin Zhongyang's pupil shrank. He stomped his feet and instantly retreated dozens of steps. Zhuowen's spear was too tricky. If he didn't retreat, he would be in danger. This little bit of strength of mine is not enough. Why are you retreating under my attacks? Zhuowen suddenly ridiculed. Yin Zhongyang's eyes darkened. He coldly snorted and said, "I was just lucky. Now, let's see if you can still be as arrogant as before. Die." As he spoke, Yin Zhongyang once again pounced forward. The trident carried a dense aura of the sea and locked onto Zhuowen. "I'm not playing with you anymore," Zhuowen suddenly said. Soon after, a terrifying aura of the demonic path of slaughter enveloped Zhuowen. In an instant, Zhuowen's aura was even more terrifying than before. It was as if Zhuowen had turned into a bloodthirsty azure from hell. "You're not playing with me anymore?" The corner of Yin Zhongyang's mouth twitched. Zhuowen's words were really asking for a beating. Could it be that Zhuowen had been playing with him all this time? Boom! The terrifying demonic path of slaughter descended. Zhuowen's blood-red hair fluttered in the wind. His blood-red eyes became even more ferocious and bloodthirsty. Zhuowen took a step forward. Countless mountains of corpses and seas of blood seemed to appear under his feet. It was extremely terrifying. The demonic path of slaughter existed only for the sake of slaughter. In order to slaughter, one had to step on piles of bones. How did this guy's aura become so powerful? Yin Zhongyang's expression froze. Looking at the figure that had transformed into mountains of corpses and seas of blood, his eyes revealed a trace of seriousness. Emosha, the demonic aura of slaughter on Zhuowen's body, became even more dense and profound. His blood-red eyes were filled with a bloodthirsty color. At this moment, the demonic aura on Zhuowen's body was surging, and his demonic aura was overflowing. "Kill!" Zhuowen roared. With a wave of his right hand, the blood-red spear in his hand split into two into three. A total of 10 blood-red spears appeared and circled around Zhuowen's body. Swoosh! Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, Zhuowen closed in on Yin Zhongyang. The 10 blood-red spears in his hand swept out and descended from the sky, piercing towards Yin Zhongyang below. Yin Zhongyang's face turned ugly. At this moment, the aura that Zhuowen was emitting made him feel a little apprehensive. However, he was no ordinary person. He took out the Poseidon's trident, formed a seal with both hands and shouted, "Poseidon's sacrifice!" Countless seas went crazy, rolling, and terrifying waves roared. Then, an endless amount of blue energy gathered in the Neptune trident and turned into a huge blue shadow. With the Poseidon's trident as its bones and the surrounding seas as its flesh and blood, the huge blue figure's aura was extremely terrifying. Slash! Zhuowen held the blood-red spear in his hand. With a swing of his arm, the 9 blood-red spears around him transformed into huge spears that were hundreds of feet long. They slashed down from the sky. The huge blue figure roared angrily. Not to be outdone, it blasted its arms towards the sky, bringing with it countless tsunamis. Puchi. However, the result of the collision between the two caused Yin Zhongyang's pupils to shrink slightly. The arms of the huge blue figure were actually smashed into smithereens, while its enormous body crumbled inch by inch under the might of the 9 blood spears. Whoosh! The vast sea roiled as the 9 blood-red spears swept out. The huge sea actually parted to form a wide passage. Following this passage, Zhuowen took a step forward and instantly arrived at Yin Zhongyang on the other side of the sea. How did this guy break through? Yin Zhongyang's face was pale. Looking at the incoming Zhuowen, he gritted his teeth and took out the Poseidon's trident with his right hand. He held it horizontally in front of him in an attempt to block the blood-red spears descending from the sky. Boom! The 9 blood-red spears descended one after another, each more terrifying than the last. They pressed down on the Poseidon's trident, as if 9 mountains were crushing down. Yin Zhongyang only felt that the pressure on his hands was extremely heavy. The web between his thumb and forefinger split open, and bright red blood flowed out. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and involuntarily knelt on the ground. "Ah! You damned bastard!" Yin Zhongyang roared at the sky. Ever since he started cultivating, he had never been in such a sorry state. He was even forced to kneel by his opponent's brute force. This was a great humiliation, and he, Yin Zhongyang, absolutely could not tolerate it. "Rise!" Yin Zhongyang roared. Like the Poseidon's trident, his originally kneeling knees slowly straightened, as if he wanted to separate all 9 blood-red spears from the Poseidon's trident. Can you get up?" A cold voice came from above the 9 blood-red spears. Then, Yin Zhongyang saw the red-haired and red-eyed Zhuowen slowly arrive above the 9th blood-red spear, and coldly looked down on him. "Rise!" Yin Zhongyang was unwilling to give up. The blue energy on his body became extremely dense. The 9 blood-red spears, which were originally motionless, actually began to tremble. Yin Zhongyang's aura exploded to the extreme, and he actually managed to stand up. "Your strength is not bad. Unfortunately, I still have a blood-red spear in my hand," Zhuowen said indifferently. The blood-red spear in his hand fiercely smashed down on the 9th blood-red spear. Boom! An earth-shattering force came crashing down. Then, a ring-shaped shockwave spread out in all directions. With a plop, Yin Zhongyang, who was about to stand up, was forced back to his knees by this brute force. His knees smashed into the ground, creating 2 depressions. Whoosh! Zhuowen slowly walked down from the 10th blood-red spear and arrived in front of the kneeling Yin Zhongyang. He said indifferently, "Hand over the core and I'll spare your life." "Who the hell are you?" Yin Zhongyang's eyes were filled with fear. The demonic youth in front of him was too terrifying. Even though he had used the Poseidon's sacrifice, he was still suppressed so miserably. He knew that he was no match for this kid. "Who I am is not important. What's important is whether or not you'll hand over the core. Even if you don't hand it over, I'll still be able to obtain it by killing you," Zhuowen said indifferently. However, Yin Zhongyang felt a chill in his heart. He knew very well that demonic cultivators had always done whatever they wanted. They were unscrupulous, and would kill anyone who stood in their way. Under Zhuowen's sharp gaze, Yin Zhongyang lowered his head and said, "Then take away the 10 blood-red spears on me first. That way, I won't be able to obtain the core." Nodding, Zhuowen did not doubt him. With a wave of his right hand, The 10 blood-red spears turned back into a single blood-red spear. He held it in his hand and said indifferently, "Hand it over." Yin Zhongyang glanced at Zhuan with fear. With a flick of his finger, he took out a crystal from his spiritual ring and threw it at Zhuan. Zhuan reached out with his right hand and immediately grabbed the crystal. The moment his gaze landed on the crystal, his pupils shrank to the size of needles. It was because the crystal was not the core of the blood soul tree, but a strange crystal that was dark red in color. Not good. This is a blood explosion crystal. Kid, throw it away, Xiaohe hurriedly reminded him in his mind. Chapter 974. Blood Explosion Crystal Rumble. A terrifying explosion resounded as the blood explosion crystal released a terrifying ball of blood-red light that enveloped Zhuan. Yin Zhongyang stomped his foot and hurriedly retreated nearly 100 steps. His gaze was focused on the ball of blood-red light in front of him, and his expression was one of satisfaction. When Zhuan had asked him for the core, he had already planned to give the blood explosion crystal away. He had obtained the blood explosion crystal by chance, and it contained a terrifying amount of violent energy. When this violent energy erupted, it was extremely terrifying. Even if it was an early-stage heavenly venerable martial artist, if caught off guard and enveloped by this explosive energy, their fate would not be any better. Hee, you deserve to die. You want the core? You're really courting death. Yin Zhongyang's lips curled up as he spoke coldly. Boom. Suddenly, Yin Zhongyang noticed that the ball of light in front of him had started to shrink, as if it was being sucked in by something. Yin Zhongyang's pupils shrank to the size of needles. What's going on? Yin Zhongyang frowned slightly as he muttered in a strange tone. Thump, 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 thump. The crisp sound of footsteps suddenly came out of the ball of light. Yin Zhongyang's expression froze as a look of disbelief appeared in his eyes. When he looked over, he saw that the ball of light in front of him had completely shrunk to the size of a palm. Then, the blood-red-haired and red-eyed Zhuan slowly walked out. On his right cheek, a strange demonic tattoo constantly flickered with a pitch-black light. The explosive energy of the blood explosion crystal had been absorbed by the demonic tattoo on Zhuan's right cheek. As for Zhuan, he walked out unscathed. A pair of bloodthirsty eyes stared coldly at Yin Zhongyang, causing the latter to involuntarily shiver. Cold. Zhuan's gaze was too cold. It was so cold that Yin Zhongyang could not help but shiver. Yin Zhongyang, you're very good. I originally said that I would spare your life, but you forced me to kill you. Zhuan's voice was extremely cold. He was furious that he had been tricked by Zhuan. The blood explosion crystal's energy was extremely violent. If Zhuan had been hit by it, even if he didn't die, he would have been seriously injured. Fortunately, the magic tattoo hidden on his right cheek suddenly released an extremely powerful suction force, absorbing all of the blood explosion crystal's violent energy. This was a demonic pattern extracted from a demonic weapon. Its demonic power was terrifying. However, with Zhuan's current cultivation and realm, he was still unable to tap into the power of this demonic pattern. He could only wait passively for it to be triggered. This made Zhuan a little depressed. However, he also knew that this demonic pattern was definitely not ordinary, so he did not pursue the matter. He knew that as his cultivation increased, the power of this demonic pattern would definitely be unearthed and utilized by him. But now was not the time. How is that possible? The blood explosion crystal's energy has been absorbed? Yin Zhongyang slowly took a few steps back. His eyes were filled with shock as he looked at the devil tattoo on Zhuan's right cheek that was constantly flickering with black light. Run! Yin Zhongyang let out a shrill cry as he took a step forward and fled into the passageway behind him. The demonic youth before him was simply too terrifying. He was clearly only a supreme being, yet the battle prowess he displayed was so terrifying. Even the violent energy of the blood explosion crystal couldn't do anything to this young man. Yin Zhongyang didn't have any confidence in facing this young man. The Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's crown prince, Yin Zhongyang, who had always been arrogant and unruly, was finally afraid. The demonic young man in front of him was so powerful that he couldn't breathe. Want to run? Do you think that's possible? Zhuan sneered. With a stomp of his foot, a violent bloody aura erupted. He shot forward like a bullet, arriving above Yin Zhongyang in an instant. With a push of his right hand, a terrifying demonic power of massacre surged out, slamming heavily into Yin Zhongyang's back. Puchi! Yin Zhongyang spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as snow. Under the force of this palm strike, he was sent crashing into the ground, creating a deep crater. Whoosh! Zhuowen stomped on Yin Zhongyang's chest, causing him to fall back into the crater. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, and he looked extremely miserable. You dare to kill me? Yin Zhongyang narrowed his eyes and said coldly, You think I don't dare? I originally planned to spare your life, but you didn't seize the opportunity. So, you don't have any more chances now. Zhuowen said indifferently. He stretched out his right hand, and the blood spear appeared in his hand. Without any hesitation, he stabbed it towards Yin Zhongyang's forehead. This attack was meant to kill Yin Zhongyang once and for all. Yin Zhongyang could also sense the dense killing intent in Zhuo Wen's eyes. He knew that the young man before him truly intended to kill him. With a fierce howl, he took out a jade tablet from his bosom and unceremoniously crushed it. Soon after, a terrifying aura enveloped Yin Zhongyang's body. Yin Zhongyang's speed soared to the extreme, and he actually escaped from Zhuo Wen's control. You're so fast. But no matter how fast you are, you still have to stay here. Zhuo Wen's gaze changed slightly. With a stomp of his foot, he chased after the fleeing Yin Zhongyang. You're haunting me. Yin Zhongyang's eyes were dark. Another jade tablet appeared in his hand, and he crushed it again. His speed was actually several times faster than before. He turned into a ray of light and disappeared into the corridor. Zhuo Wen's expression was ugly. He said coldly, Do you think you can escape like this? As he spoke, a jade leaf appeared in his hand. It was the Wind Control 9 Autumns that he had robbed from Qing Shuzi. This Wind Control 9 Autumns could teleport Zhuowen to any location within 1,000 miles. After crushing the Wind Control 9 Autumns, Zhuowen's figure instantly disappeared from the stone hall. Whoosh! In the dark corridor, a figure flashed past like a ghost. It was Yin Zhongyang, who had escaped from the stone hall. At this moment, Yin Zhongyang's face was as pale as snow. He looked extremely weak, but his eyes were filled with hatred. I, Yin Zhongyang, have never been in such a sorry state. That bastard actually forced me into this state. It's too hateful. After this assessment, I will definitely not let that bastard go. Yin Zhongyang gritted his teeth and said. At this moment, in the stone hall, only he and the demonic youth knew about this. If he was defeated by the demonic youth in front of everyone, Yin Zhongyang would be too ashamed to show his face. Fortunately, I obtained the heart of the blood soul tree this time. This thing is quite beneficial to me. As he spoke, Yin Zhongyang took out a blood-red hexahedral crystal core from his spiritual ring. The hatred in his eyes slowly faded, and was replaced by a trace of excitement. As expected of the heart of the blood soul tree, what a rich life force. This thing is a sacred healing medicine. As he spoke, Yin Zhongyang took a deep breath. He immediately felt refreshed and the gloominess in his heart disappeared. Then he pinched the heart of the heart with his right hand, and began to absorb the life force within it to heal his injuries. Puchi! A blood-red spear suddenly descended from the sky, and pierced through Yin Zhongyang's right hand, that was holding the heart of the blood soul tree. Then blood splattered and the heart of the blood soul tree soared into the sky. Ah! Yin Zhongyang suddenly screamed. He covered the wound on his right arm and retreated. His gaze was fixed on the broken arm, that was pinned to the ground by the blood-red spear. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He was all too familiar with this blood-red spear. It was the weapon of the demonic youth. However, he was even more puzzled about how the demonic youth had caught up with him. The jade pendant that he had crushed contained the law of wind, which greatly increased his speed. If he had crushed the jade pendant, even a peak heavenly venerable warrior would not have been able to catch up with him. However, not only had the demonic youth caught up with him, but he had also secretly broken his arm. Whoosh! A figure covered in a bloody aura slowly walked to the front of the blood spear, and pulled it out with his right hand. Under Yin Zhongyang's gloomy gaze, he slowly removed the heart core in the severed arm's hand, and the spirit ring on his finger. After doing all that, Zhuowen turned his head and stared at Yun Zhongyang, who was not far away. He said indifferently, "Next, it won't be as simple as just breaking an arm." Boom! After saying that, Zhuowen stomped the ground. A terrifying murderous demonic aura surged out and shot out like a cannonball. It was so fast that it was dazzling. Yun Zhongyang roared, and actually took out a jade pendant from his chest. He crushed it without hesitation. His entire body was enveloped by the law of wind. With the sound of something breaking through the air, Yun Zhongyang turned into a gentle breeze and instantly disappeared from the passageway. Boom! Zhuowen's fist missed and slammed into the stone wall beside the passageway. A powerful force spread out, and the entire passageway shook violently. He actually has a jade pendant. The jade pendant on Yun Zhongyang's body contains a trace of the law of wind. Once it is crushed, Yun Zhongyang can temporarily borrow the power of the law of wind to increase his speed to the extreme. Even I would have a hard time catching up to him. Zhuowen muttered softly and did not chase after Yun Zhongyang. Although he could catch up to Yun Zhongyang if he used another Wind of 9 Autumns, Zhuowen only had 4 Wind of 9 Autumns. After using one earlier, he only had 3 left. The Wind of 9 Autumns was a useful tool for escaping. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Zhuowen would not use it casually. Now that he had already snatched the heart of the Blood Soul Tree and Yun Zhongyang's spiritual ring, Zhuowen naturally would not waste the Wind of 9 Autumns to chase after Yun Zhongyang. Sizzle! Sizzle! Holding the heart of the Blood Soul Tree and feeling the powerful vitality in his palm, Zhuowen could not help but reveal a relaxed and happy expression. The vitality in the heart of the Blood Soul Tree was indeed very powerful. Kid, don't absorb the vitality in the heart of the Blood Soul Tree first. This is not how you should use it. A black light came out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows and turned into the appearance of Xiaohe. Xiaohe came to the side of the heart of the Blood Soul Tree and hooked her right hand. Immediately, a surge of soul power gushed out from the heart of the Blood Soul Tree and entered Xiaohe's body. Zhuowen knew that this should be the soul power contained in the heart of the Blood Soul Tree. This soul power had undeniable benefits for Xiaohe. Therefore, Zhuowen did not disturb Xiaohe and only watched silently. Chapter 975. Cheng Dong's anger at this moment. Xiaohe's figure was a lot more solid than before. As Xiaohe had expended too much of her origin after the battle with the Qing Emperor, she had always been very weak. However, the soul power in the core of the Blood Soul Tree was very strong. After Xiaohe finished absorbing it, her spiritual body recovered a lot. Her aura was also a lot more solid. Xiaohe, you told me not to absorb the core of the Blood Soul Tree first. Is there another use for this core? After Xiaohe finished absorbing it, Zhuowen frowned and asked. Xiaohe was very satisfied at this moment. She nodded and said, "Of course. This core should be the heart of the Blood Soul Tree. It's the most important part. If you absorb the life force in it using normal methods, it'll be a waste." Zhuowen was stunned. He didn't say anything. Instead, he looked calmly at Xiaohe and waited for her to continue. He knew that Xiaohe hadn't said the main point, so he didn't interrupt. Placing this thing in your heart is the best way. The life force it contains can be completely absorbed into your heart. Furthermore, it can perfectly fuse with the Hades King's heart, greatly increasing his recovery ability. Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyelids twitched. Xiaohe was really daring. She actually wanted to place the core in his heart. Didn't that mean she had to open his heart? Is this method safe? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Xiaohe nodded and said, "Don't worry. You don't trust my words. This core has a lot of life force. It's very beneficial to the heart of the Hades King. Do you want to do this? Alright then. I'll give it a try." Zhuowen nodded and agreed. He stood where he was as Xiaohe said. Xiaohe came to Zhuowen's chest. She swiped her claws, and a sharp black aura swept past. Immediately, the skin on Zhuowen's chest was cut. After that, a black aura enveloped the core. Whoosh! Under Xiaohe's control, the heart core, which was wrapped in black gas, slowly moved towards Zhuowen's heart and finally entered it. Poochie! Zhuowen felt a sharp pain in his chest as he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, The pain only lasted for a moment before Zhuowen felt an exuberant vitality permeating his entire chest. Moreover, this vitality followed the pulse of his heart and spread to Zhuowen's limbs and bones. Zhuowen felt his whole body become refreshed, and he could not help but shout to the sky. What a powerful life force! It seems that the effect of placing the core in the heart is much better than directly absorbing it, Zhuowen said excitedly. That's natural. The heart core is placed in your heart. If you need life force, you can immediately extract it from your heart. Even if the life force within it dissipates, it will still permeate your body and not waste any of it, Xiaohe said in a somewhat disdainful tone. Zhuowen nodded. Xiaohe was right. Moreover, he also discovered that the heart core contained an extremely powerful energy. This energy was extremely rich, and it almost spread throughout his entire body. What a powerful energy! It just so happens that I can use this energy to break through to the late stage of the Supreme Being stage. Zhuowen was initially stunned. Soon after, he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He hurriedly sat down on the ground and began to diligently refine this surging energy. He channeled it into his dantian and strengthened the yuan power in his dantian. Time slowly passed. For half a day, Zhuowen basically sat in the passageway and refined the energy of the heart core. Soon after, an extremely powerful aura burst out from Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen also slowly opened his eyes. A bright light flickered in them. The energy of the Blood Soul Tree's heart core was truly surging. It had actually pushed his cultivation to the late stage of the Supreme Being stage in an instant. After advancing, Zhuowen's strength was several times stronger than before. If he were to encounter Yin Zhongyang again, he would be able to suppress him without having to enter the devil state. Of course, Yin Zhongyang also had many trump cards on him. If he did not enter the devil state, although he could suppress Yin Zhongyang, it would not be that easy to defeat him. Let's continue forward. Although there are countless branches in this Iron Man cave, they should all lead to the same exit. Being able to obtain the Blood Soul Tree's heart core is already a great harvest for you, Xiaohe said to Zhuowen. Zhuowen nodded. The harvest this time was not bad. The Blood Soul Tree's heart core was really good. Not only did it give him a powerful vitality, but it also contained a powerful energy. It had actually advanced his cultivation from the middle stage of the Supreme Being stage to the late stage of the Supreme Being stage. This Yin Zhongyang's wealth is not bad. There are actually more than 3 million high-grade spiritual stones in there. That's really terrifying. Zhuowen gently rubbed the spiritual ring in his hand as he spoke indifferently. This spiritual ring was naturally Zhuowen's spiritual ring. After obtaining the spiritual ring, Zhuowen had asked Xiaohe to erase the soul imprint on the surface of the spiritual ring. Naturally, the contents of the spiritual ring were revealed to him. Yin Zhongyang was indeed the crown prince of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. The spiritual ring was indeed very rich. Not only did it contain 3 million high-grade spiritual stones, but it also contained many precious spiritual treasures. However, Zhuowen was disappointed that Yin Zhongyang's sea god's trident was not in the spiritual ring. Obviously, the sea god's trident should be on Yin Zhongyang's body, and not in the spiritual ring. What a pity! If the sea god's trident was also in the spiritual ring, it would be perfect. Zhuowen muttered to himself in disappointment, causing Xiaohe to roll her eyes. This brat seemed to be even more greedy than her, the Dragon Lord. After tidying up the items in Yin Zhongyang's spiritual ring, Zhuowen took a step forward and continued along the corridor. Just as Xiaohe had guessed, they should be able to reach the exit of the Iron Man cave at the end of the corridor. The exit of the Iron Man cave was located in a valley. At this moment, there were 8 figures standing quietly in the valley. 4 of them were the 4 old men who presided over the Iron Man cave, while the other 3 were in charge of the first stage of the test, Cheng Dong, Hu Jia and Qi Ji. However, the 7 of them were standing respectfully behind the 8th figure, their faces filled with reverence and respect. This was an old man with a benevolent countenance. He wore a loose robe, and his forehead was very high like a peach. His large ears hung down on his shoulders like palm leaf fans. His aura was overwhelming, like an emperor or an emperor. This old man was definitely an emperor, and not an ordinary one at that. I never thought that the principal would actually come out as well. Isn't this a bit too much of a fuss? The tall and skinny old man looked respectfully at the imposing figure in front of him and frowned. Generally speaking, the principal of the outer court rarely took care of matters, and it was even more impossible for the principal to attend such a small matter as recruitment. But now, not only was the principal paying attention to this recruitment, he was even prepared to personally preside over the third stage of the test. Chengdong, Qi and Hujia also stared at the back of the principal in front of them in shock. When they arrived at the valley just now, the principal was already standing in the valley, as if he was waiting for the second stage of the test to end. What surprised them even more was that the principal told them that he would personally preside over the third stage of the test. This was heavy news, and to them, it could be said that they were not surprised, but even more so, they were puzzled. The principal had not cared about the affairs of the academy for a long time. Now that he suddenly appeared, and even planned to preside over the third stage of the recruitment test, it was indeed a bit strange. Could it be that there is a genius among the new students that is worthy of the principal's attention? Hujia suddenly asked in confusion. Qi nodded and said, "It's possible. The Yaoguang sacred dynasty's Yuan Zhao's talent is the most terrifying and strongest among the new students in the past few years. Perhaps the principal came for this Yuan Zhao. That Yuan Zhao was not a new student that she was in charge of, so no matter how strong his talent was, it had nothing to do with her. However, Yuan Zhao's talent was indeed very strong, and Hujia had to admit this. In the past, there were also some peerless monsters that were not inferior to Yuan Zhao in the slightest. Why didn't the principal appear? Why did he personally come out to preside over it this time? Hujia suddenly said in displeasure. The corner of Qi's mouth raised slightly as he said proudly, Yuan Zhao has always been very low-key. Do you really think that Yuan Zhao is only at the middle stage of the Sky Sovereign realm? What if he didn't reveal all of his strength? Looking at Qi's arrogant appearance, Hujia was a little displeased. Wasn't this guy just a little lucky this time that there were two Empyrean realm monsters in the group that he was in charge of? To actually show such a proud expression, Hujia was extremely displeased. Chengdong, do you think so too? Hujia turned his head and asked Chengdong, who had been silent the entire time. Chengdong was startled, then laughed bitterly. Actually, I'm not sure either. But what Hujia said is right. There were a few peerless monsters whose talent was not inferior to Yuan Zhao in the previous few batches. But the principal never came out. But this time he did. It is indeed a little strange. For some reason, Chengdong couldn't help but think of Zhuowen's figure. That guy was the first new student to pass through the Empyrean Iron Man cave as a sovereign. Could it be that the principal's arrival was not because of Yuan Zhao, but because of that Zhuowen? Chengdong, could it be that you mean that in this batch of new students, there are geniuses even more monstrous than Yuan Zhao? Or is it because you're unresigned that you said that? Qi stared at Chengdong and suddenly teased. Chengdong's gaze darkened as he said coldly, Qi, what do you mean by that? Qi shrugged his shoulders and said, Nothing? I just feel that the quality of the people you're in charge of is so poor. So you don't want to admit Yuan Zhao's talent. Or perhaps you're a little jealous of the people I'm in charge of. Qi, you think too highly of yourself. I really don't care about your batch of people. Perhaps the new king this time might not be able to land in the batch you're in charge of, Chengdong said with a cold gaze. With Qi saying it like this, how could Chengdong not hear the sarcasm in the former's words? Oh, Chengdong, you said that the new king this time isn't in my batch. Could it be in your batch? You have to know, your batch doesn't even have an Empyrean martial artist. Do you think that it's possible? Or is it that you're saying it in a fit of anger, because you can't bear to lose face? Qi said with a cold smile. Chapter 976. Nine Twists Treasure Pill. Qi and Hujia were both stunned. The two of them did not expect that Chengdong would actually propose a gambling fight. Furthermore, it was even betting on who the newcomer king would land among the new students in charge. Actually, this problem was already very obvious. The newcomer king belonged to either the batch of people that Qi was in charge of, or Hujia's batch of people, while Chengdong had no hope at all. After all, the batch of people that Chengdong was in charge of did not even have an Empyrean martial artist. No matter how one thought about it, it was impossible for anyone in Chengdong's batch to seize the newcomer king. You really plan on betting with me? After coming back to his senses, Qi grinned and said mockingly. But Hujia's long, shapely brows furrowed slightly and she urged, Chengdong, don't let your emotions affect your decisions. You also know that there isn't even an Empyrean martial artist in your batch. Wanting to seize the newcomer king is seriously not too likely. Don't make this kind of impulsive decision because of impulsiveness. Hujia, why do you need to persuade? Some people are very confident, thinking that someone in their batch can seize the newcomer king. What's the use of you persuading? Qi said somewhat eccentrically. Hujia's face darkened, and she said coldly, Qi, don't go overboard. You clearly know the quality of that batch of new students in Chengdong's batch. Why are you still so shamelessly provoking Chengdong? Hearing that, Qi gave a cold snort and did not answer Hujia's words. Instead, he turned to Chengdong and said, What? Regretting the gambling fight that you proposed? Hiding behind a woman now, are you planning on running away? Chengdong's gaze was gloomy as he said coldly, When I proposed it, I didn't think of running away. Now you're more like a man. How about this? Since it's a gambling fight, then there has to be chips, right? Qi said once more. Chengdong said coldly, Then you say it. What chips do you need? But Qi smiled and said, Chengdong, I remember that you have a 9-twist treasure pill on you, right? It's said that this 9-twist treasure pill has the effect of cleansing the marrow and raising talent. It's said that it can even have the effect of raising a minor realm in a short time. You want the 9-twist treasure pill? Chengdong's gaze turned cold. This Qi was really asking for too much. He wanted to ask for the 9-twists rejuvenation pill right from the start. This pill had been exchanged from the outer yard with contribution points that he had accumulated over 3 years. He was going to use it when his cultivation level reached the peak of the heavenly venerable realm. Perhaps it could increase his chances of reaching the imperial power realm. It could be said that this 9 reviving treasure pill was one of the most precious things on Chengdong's body. This Qi wanted him to take out the 9 reviving treasure pill as a bargaining chip. He was really ruthless. Qi, you're going too far. You clearly know how useful this 9-twist treasure pill is to Chengdong, and you actually let him take it out as a bargaining chip. Don't you think you're going too far? Hujia said with a gloomy face. Qi coldly snorted, but his eyes were fixed on Chengdong. The corners of his mouth curled up as he said, What? When you heard that the wager was the 9 revivals treasure pill, you didn't dare and hid behind a woman again. Chengdong narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Chengdong, don't try to goad me anymore. Since you want me to take out the 9 revivals treasure pill, then I'll take it out. But what's your bargaining chip? As he spoke, Chengdong flicked his finger and took out a round pill from his spirit ring. This pill was very strange. On its surface, there were actually 9 different colored rings of light. Waves of dense medicinal energy leaked out. Qi stared at the pill, his eyes revealing a strange look. However, after hearing Chengdong's question, Qi said in surprise, You're asking me? Haha, this time, the newcomer king will definitely belong to me. I'll reserve your 9 revivals treasure pill first. I don't need to take out anything at all, because you'll definitely lose. Chengdong narrowed his eyes and said coldly, I said if you lose, what kind of bargaining chip will you take out? The second stage of the test hasn't ended yet. It's too early for you to make such a conclusion. Qi's face froze. Seeing Chengdong's serious look, he shrugged and said, If I lose, then I'll give you this royal-grade spirit treasure as a bargaining chip. A small shield flashing with green light appeared in Qi's hand. He looked at Chengdong provocatively. Chengdong, do you really think I'm a fool? A mere royal-grade low-grade spirit treasure wants to compete with my 9 revivals treasure pill? Do you really think I'm blind? Chengdong said with an ugly face. The value of the 9 revivals treasure pill was very high. It was completely comparable to a royal-grade high-grade spirit treasure. Wasn't Qi trying to fool him by taking out a royal-grade low-grade spirit treasure? Then what kind of bargaining chip do you want? Qi asked with a frown. The shield in your hand, and the mighty sky sword on your back. Cheng Dong pointed at the long sword on Qi's back and said lightly, You want the mighty sky sword? Qi's face darkened. The mighty sky sword was his natal spirit treasure. It was a royal grade high-grade spirit treasure. If his cultivation reached the emperor realm one day, the mighty sky sword would also transform into an emperor weapon. At that time, it would really soar into the sky, and its value would be immeasurable. What? If you don't want to, then I won't force you, Cheng Dong said lightly. Qi's eyes flickered. However, when he remembered that Yin Zhongyang and Yuan Zhao were both extremely talented geniuses in their group, he was assured that he would win the title of newcomer king. Therefore, he was relieved and said lightly, Since you're willing to take out the 9 revivals treasure pill, why can't I take out the mighty sky sword? Brother Qi is really straightforward. I'm quite looking forward to the final result of this new student selection. Seeing that Qi had agreed, Cheng Dong showed a bright smile on his face. At this moment, the kind-looking dean stood quietly in front of the valley and asked the 4 old men beside him, How many people have passed through the Iron Man cave this time? The lanky old man quickly said, There are 10,000 people who have successfully entered the Iron Man cave. However, the Iron Man cave is not safe inside. I'm afraid that a third of them will be eliminated. There should only be about 7,000 new students coming out. Oh, 10,000 people have successfully entered the Iron Man cave. It seems that the quality of this batch of new students is much better than the previous batches. The benevolent-looking dean nodded and continued to ask, Are there any more outstanding monstrous geniuses? The lanky old man nodded and said respectfully, The quality of this batch of new students is indeed good. There are 3 peerless geniuses who have reached the heavenly venerable realm before the age of 25. They are the eldest prince of the Alcade Holy Dynasty, Yuan Zhao, the crown prince of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty, Yin Zhongyang, and the genius of the Myriad Sword sect Pom Pom. It's worth mentioning that Yuan Zhao's cultivation has reached the middle stage of the heavenly venerable realm. He is considered the strongest among this batch of new students. If there are no accidents, he will be this year's newcomer king. The dean nodded and his eyes flickered. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. The quality of this batch of new students is indeed good. Perhaps there will be a pleasant surprise in the 3rd stage of the test. The dean suddenly smiled. The 4 old men were confused by the dean's words. They did not understand what the dean was trying to say. Swoosh, swoosh. At this moment, several figures appeared at the entrance of the Supreme Iron Man cave. The first to appear was the Mystique Supreme Iron Man cave. After all, the difficulty of the 4 caves was different. The Mystique Supreme Iron Man cave was undoubtedly the easiest cave. Therefore, it was not surprising that someone appeared first. The 3 people who appeared first quickly noticed the 8 figures at the front of the valley. They were stunned at first, but then they rushed toward the dean and the 4 old men. The 3 of you wait here. The dean waved his sleeve and smiled. The 3 of them nodded and waited silently. They were not stupid. When they saw the 4 old men standing respectfully behind the benevolent-looking old man, they knew that the old man was not an ordinary person. As time passed, more and more silhouettes rushed out of the Iron Man cave. However, most of them were Mystique Venerables and Martial Venerables. After all, most of the new students this time had this level of cultivation. There were only about a dozen Golden Venerables and 3 Heavenly Venerables. Soon, more than 5,000 warriors gathered in the valley. Kanan and Gatha were among the crowd. The 2 of them looked at the entrance of the Supreme Iron Man cave from time to time to see if Zhuan was there. Why hasn't Brother Zhua come out yet? With his strength, he should be able to come out soon. Kanan whispered worriedly. Gatha, who was beside him, patted Kanan's shoulder and said softly, Brother Zhua is very strong. Although he is only a sovereign martial artist, he has the fighting power of a Golden Venerable. I'm afraid Brother Zhua has chosen the Golden Venerable Iron Man cave. May I know the full name of this Brother Zhua that you're talking about? Just as Kanan and Gatha were discussing Zhuan, an untimely crisp voice suddenly came from behind them. The 2 siblings turned around and saw a woman in her 20s with a delicate face. She asked them with a strange look in her eyes. When the woman asked the question, there was a hint of nervousness in her eyes. Brother Zhuo's name is Zhuowen. Why? Do you know Brother Zhuo? Kanan looked at the beautiful woman in front of him and asked curiously. The young woman's cultivation was not bad. She was probably in the late stages of the Swordsmanship realm. She had also come out of the mystique venerable Iron Man cave. However, Kanan was confused. Why did this woman ask about Brother Zhuo? You're Zhuowen? When the woman heard that, her face turned pale. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. She could not help but take a few steps back. Kanan also saw the strange look in the woman's eyes. He could not help but ask, "Who are you? Do you know Brother Zhuo?" The woman shook her head and forced a smile. Maybe it's not the same person. We just have the same name. With that, the woman hurriedly left where Kanan and Gatha were. The siblings were confused. Chapter 977. Exiting the caveat this moment, Glen Lily's heart was in a mess. She had thought that after Zhuowen disappeared into the spatial crack, everything would be over. As time passed, Zhuowen's figure would eventually disappear from her mind. However, when she heard Jia Nan and Gatha call him Brother Zhuo, her heart was in a mess. The first person that came to her mind was Zhuowen, which was why she asked. The answer she received was like a bolt from the blue, striking Glen Lily's heart. The Brother Zhuo that Jia Nan and Gatha called him was also called Zhuowen. Zhuowen was forced to escape into the spatial crack by Emperor Qing. There's no way he could have survived. Maybe it's someone with the same name? Glen Lily muttered softly. Her beautiful face regained its calmness. She knew very well how harsh the environment in the spatial crack was. Even a martial emperor could not survive for long in there. Zhuowen was only a martial saint at that time. It was impossible for him to survive. Therefore, Glen Lily subconsciously thought that the Brother Zhuo that Jia Nan and Gatha were talking about was someone with the same name. Although she thought so, Glen Lily clenched her fists tightly. Her beautiful eyes stared at the entrance of the Iron Man cave. She wanted to see if Zhuowen was in there. If Zhuowen didn't die, I wonder what level his cultivation would be at. For some reason, such a strange thought suddenly appeared in Glen Lily's mind. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. More and more figures flew out of the Sovereign Iron Man cave and Mystique Iron Man cave. When the number of people reached more than 6,000, no more cultivators appeared from the two caves. Everyone knew that most of the martial saints from the Swordsmanship realm and the Supremes had arrived. As for the rest, they had probably died in the caves. After all, the caves were filled with traps. If one was not strong enough or was not careful enough, they could die. Now only the Sovereign Iron Man cave and the Heavenly Iron Man cave are left. When no more warriors came out of the Supreme Iron Man cave and the Mystique Iron Man cave, everyone's gaze shifted to the two dark caves on the left. From just now until now, no one from the Golden Venerable Iron Man cave or the Celestial Venerable Iron Man cave had come out, so they were all looking forward to it. After half an incense stick of time, the sound of rushing air appeared. Immediately, a figure suddenly rushed out from the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave and appeared in front of everyone. This person's expression was indifferent and untainted by even a speck of dust. His eyes were filled with arrogance, and the aura on his body was as vast as the sea, extremely surging. It's Yaoguang Holy Dynasty's second prince Yuankong. Yuankong's cultivation base has reached the peak of the Golden Exalt level. It won't be difficult for him to enter the Golden Exalt Iron Man cave. Quite a number of people in the valley began to discuss when they saw this spotless figure. Clearly, they had also recognized Yuan Kong. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Not long after Yuan Kong appeared, another 3 people rushed out of the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave. These 3 people were 2 men and a woman. The woman was quite young and wore a white lotus dress. She looked pure and holy. As for the 2 men, one of them was dressed in blue and had a warm smile on his face, giving people a feeling of being bathed in the spring breeze. The other man was dressed in yellow and had a cold expression. His appearance was ordinary, and there was nothing outstanding about him. Cold Moon Palace's Shike, Yellow Profound Sex Huang Xian, and Blue Smoke from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. The three of them are quite fast. Everyone recognized these three people. Among them, Shi Ke and Huang Xian were both at the peak of the Golden Exalt level. But Blue Smoke was only at the late stage of the Golden Exalt level. However, to be able to rush out of the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave at the same time as these two people, Blue Smoke was obviously not simple. I just stepped out, and you're already here. Not bad. Yuan Kong glanced indifferently at Blue Smoke and the other two and said arrogantly. Of course. How can we be compared to the second prince of the Alcade Holy Dynasty? Blue Smoke smiled faintly and said indifferently. However, Yuan Kong felt that it was a little harsh to hear. However, there was nothing wrong with Blue Smoke's words, so he could not flare up. He only snorted coldly and did not reply. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Another two figures rushed out of the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave. They were Yuan Tong from the Divine Arm Holy Dynasty and Fun Ji from the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty. After the two of them rushed out of the exit, they looked at the lively valley in front of them and were stunned at first. Then, under the instruction of the dean, they went to the side and waited silently. After half an incense stick of time, everyone realized that there were no more cultivators rushing out of the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave. They all knew that the remaining Golden Exalts had probably died in the cave. Is the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave so terrifying? Almost half of the Golden Exalt geniuses have died, and only 6 Golden Exalt geniuses have come out? Everyone's eyes flickered, and they all felt a little strange. However, Yuan Kong's brows were tightly knitted together, because his third brother Yuanxing had not come out yet. Could it be that he had really died in there? Swoosh. Just as everyone was guessing, another figure rushed out of the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave's exit. This person's clothes were ragged, and his figure was in a sorry state. It was the Alcade Holy Dynasty's third prince Yuanxing. Third brother. Yuan Kong was shocked and hurried to Yuanxing's side. His right palm pressed against Yuanxing's back, and he began to continuously transmit his origin power to Yuanxing's body. Yuanxing's breathing was rapid, and his chest kept rising and falling. Fortunately, with the support of Yuan Kong's origin power, Yuanxing's breathing gradually calmed down. Thank you, second brother. Yuanxing looked at Yuan Kong gratefully. We're brothers, there's no need to say this. Now we're just waiting for big brother to come out. There's only one last test left. If the three of us successfully pass, it will be a kind of glory when we return to the Alcade Holy Dynasty. Yuan Kong shook his head and said with a smile. Yuanxing nodded and said, the three of us will definitely pass the test. After Yuanxing, no one else appeared in the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave. Everyone knew that only the 7 people in front of them had passed the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave. Swoosh. Just when everyone thought that there was no one left, another figure rushed out of the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave. This person's skin was as white as snow, his lips were red, and his teeth were white. He was obviously a man, but he was more beautiful than a woman. He was the Yanxian dynasty's prince, Mo Lingtian. A peak venerable has passed the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave? The dean, who was originally calm, suddenly looked at Mo Lingtian and nodded, as if he had recognized Mo Lingtian's talent. Who is this person? A peak venerable has passed the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave. His talent and strength are really strong. Mo Lingtian's appearance immediately attracted everyone's attention, especially Mo Lingtian's peak venerable aura, which made many people's jaws drop. A venerable who had passed the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave was indisputable. Even the other 7 Golden Sovereign geniuses couldn't help but look at Mo Lingtian. This person isn't a genius from the 4 great sacred dynasties or the 3 great sects. He can actually pass the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave as a venerable? Yuan Kong said with slight jealousy. When he had challenged the Metal Man, he had intended to pass the Heavenly Sovereign Metal Man cave as a peak Golden Sovereign. However, he had given up because of his brother's words. Until now, there had never been a genius who had passed the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave. Mo Lingtian was definitely the first one, so Mo Lingtian became the focus of many people. The Flame Emperor, who was in the crowd, had a look of excitement in his eyes. Mo Lingtian had passed the Golden Sovereign Metal Man cave, and even he was a little surprised. Emo Lingtian had indeed lived up to his expectations. At this moment, Emo Lingtian was a little embarrassed, but it wasn't as exaggerated as Yuanqing's. After all, his cultivation was only at the peak venerable realm. Being able to pass the Golden Sovereign Metal Man Cave was already an impressive performance. After entering the crowd, Emo Lingtian quickly came to the side of Jia Nan and Gatha. Xianxing was also beside the two siblings. Emo Lingtian landed beside Xianxing and the other two. He turned his head and nodded at the Flame Emperor, who was outside the valley. The family members and elders who were related to them could only wait outside the valley. The Flame Emperor, the 5 heavenly sovereigns and Xianxing's elders were all waiting outside. Brother Emo, congratulations this time. You actually passed the Golden Sovereign Metal Man Cave. If you pass the 3rd test, you will definitely be heavily groomed when you enter the outer court, Xianxing said with a little envy. Emo Lingtian waved his hand and said a few words of humility. He looked at Jia Nan and Gatha and said, "Where's Brother Zhua? Why hasn't he come out yet?" Jia Nan and Gatha also shook their heads in confusion. They also didn't know why Zhuowen hadn't come out yet. Brother Zhua should also be challenging the Golden Sovereign Metal Man Cave, right? But we haven't seen him come out yet. Does that mean that Brother Zhua is inside? Gatha said with a little worry. Gatha, don't talk nonsense. Brother Zhua is so powerful. How could he have fallen inside? He should be coming out of the Golden Sovereign Metal Man Cave soon. Jia Nan said with a little displeasure. Gatha shrunk her neck and didn't dare to say anything. The few of them also fell into a rare silence. Their eyes were all fixed on the exit of the Golden Sovereign Metal Man Cave. What disappointed Jia Nan and the others was that Zhuowen's figure still hadn't appeared. Even Jia Nan began to wonder if Zhuowen had really fallen in the Golden Sovereign Metal Man Cave. Emo Lingtian, on the other hand, frowned slightly. His eyes were fixed on the Golden Sovereign Metal Man Cave. A somewhat crazy idea was slowly brewing in his mind. Maybe I'm thinking too much? It's unlikely that a supreme being would overestimate himself and challenge the Golden Sovereign Metal Man Cave. Emo Lingtian quickly overthrew the idea in his heart and smiled bitterly. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air suddenly rang out. Then, a figure with a powerful aura suddenly rushed out of the Golden Sovereign Metal Man Cave, firmly attracting everyone's attention. It's the eldest prince of the Alcade Sacred Dynasty, Yuan Zhao. He's really the first to come out of the Golden Sovereign Metal Man Cave. Looking at the figure with the terrifying aura, everyone's eyes flickered and an uproar broke out. Although they had already guessed it, when they saw Yuan Zhao appear in front of everyone without any injuries, it still caused quite a stir. Chapter 978. Yin Zhongyang was in a sorry state. The 10,000 sword sex genius Palm is right behind him. He's a sword cultivator with terrifying combat strength. Even Yuan Zhao wouldn't dare to underestimate him. Everyone's eyes turned cold as they looked at the young man who was brimming with sword chi. Everyone knew how terrifying sword cultivators were. Some sword cultivators, who were extremely skilled in offensive techniques, could even kill someone above their level. Palm's eyes were filled with sharp sword light as he stared at Yuan Zhao, who was standing calmly in front of him. He said indifferently, "Yuan Zhao, you've hidden your strength well. Even I was fooled by you. I didn't expect you to have reached the mid-stage, heavenly venerable realm." Yuan Zhao smiled faintly and said, "Palm, you're not bad yourself. You haven't used the 10,000 sword sex offensive sword technique yet, have you? You must be planning to use it in the 3rd stage of the test, right? Hehe. Perhaps you'll lose your life if I use that offensive sword technique," Palm said arrogantly. Yuan Zhao's eyes were still calm as he said, "Perhaps, but we'll only know after the 3rd stage of the test." Palm took a deep look at Yuan Zhao and frowned slightly. This Yuan Zhao really hid his strength well. Even now, he still couldn't see through Yuan Zhao's depth. Palm snorted coldly and stopped not far away from the valley. He knew that with the 10,000 sword sex signature offensive sword technique, even Yuan Zhao wouldn't be able to compete with him. The title of newcomer king would definitely be his. Now, only the Blue Whale Dynasty's crown prince, Yin Zhongyang, is left. Everyone's eyes shifted back to the heavenly venerable Iron Man cavern. Since Yuan Zhao and Palm had come out, only Yin Zhongyang was left. All three of them were monstrous heavenly venerables. Their battle prowess far exceeded that of an early-stage heavenly venerable. There shouldn't be any problem for them to pass through the heavenly venerable Iron Man cave. Therefore, no one was surprised that Yin Zhongyang had come out. The heavenly venerable Iron Man cave's palm tree and Yuan Zhao have both come out. Why hasn't Big Brother Zhuan come out yet? Kanan and Gatha both whispered worriedly. Xian Xing and Imo Lingtian exchanged glances, seeing a trace of doubt in each other's eyes. The two of them were well aware of how powerful Zhuan was. Even if Zhuan were to challenge the golden exalted Iron Man cave, it wouldn't be a problem at all. But now Zhuan still hadn't come out. There was only one possibility, and that was that he had died in the cave. As for Zhuan challenging the heavenly venerate metal man cave, the two of them didn't even think about it. After all, Zhuan was only at the mid-stage of the supremacy stage. It wasn't realistic for him to challenge the heavenly venerate metal man cave. Outside the valley, Emperor Yen, Xiang Tianzuan, and the other four had strange expressions on their faces. This was because they hadn't seen Zhuan's figure since the beginning. In other words, Zhuan hadn't come out of the Iron Man cave yet. What's going on? Why hasn't Master come out yet? Xiang Tianzuan's eyes narrowed as he frowned. Could it be that he was delayed in the Iron Man cave? Emperor Yin echoed, but he had another guess in his heart. Whoosh! Under everyone's gazes, an extremely wretched figure flew out of the heavenly venerate metal man cave. When everyone's gazes fell on the figure, they were all stunned. The third person to come out of the heavenly venerate metal man cave was indeed the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's crown prince Yin Zhongyang that they had guessed. However, what shocked them was that Yin Zhongyang's right arm had been severed from his shoulder. He looked extremely dispirited and miserable. Ah, bastard, don't let me see you again, bastard. Yin Zhongyang, who only had one arm left, couldn't help but roar at the sky as soon as he appeared in the Iron Man cave. There was a boundless rage in his chest that he wanted to vent. Yuan Zhao and Pom Pom looked at the wretched Yin Zhongyang in astonishment. They were quite familiar with Yin Zhongyang's strength. Although he was the weakest among the three of them, his combat strength wasn't weak either. It shouldn't be too much of a problem for him to pass through the heavenly venerate metal man cave. Although Yin Zhongyang had successfully come out of the Iron Man cave, the fact that he was in such a miserable state puzzled the two of them. Although the heavenly venerate metal man cave was filled with traps, it shouldn't be so exaggerated that Yin Zhongyang would end up in such a miserable state. Yin Zhongyang roared again as he came to a corner of the crowd with a cold gaze. At the same time he scanned the crowd. When he didn't find the demonic youth he had met in the heavenly venerate metal man cave, his gaze turned even colder. At that moment, everyone was discussing animatedly. Most of the topics of discussion revolved around Yin Zhongyang. However, everyone's guess was that Yin Zhongyang's strength wasn't enough, and that he had been reduced to such a state by the traps in the heavenly venerate metal man cave. How did Yin Zhongyang end up in such a sorry state? With his battle strength, he should be able to smoothly pass through the celestial Iron Man cave? Qi Ji frowned slightly and whispered in surprise. The four old men furrowed their brows. They hadn't expected that a mere heavenly exalted Iron Man cave could put Yin Zhongyang in such a sorry state. It seemed like the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's crown prince didn't live up to his name. Only Chengdong's eyes flashed with a sharp light. Others might not have paid attention to what Chengdong had said when he came out of the cave, but Chengdong's sharp senses had caught it. The reason why Yin Zhongyang had ended up in such a sorry state wasn't because of the traps in the heavenly exalted Iron Man cave. It was very likely that it was a result of a struggle between two people. Moreover, the other party definitely wasn't Palm Tree or Yuan Zhao. After all, when Yin Zhongyang appeared, Yuan Zhao and Palm Tree both revealed looks of surprise. This was something that Chengdong had already noticed. In that case, there was only one possibility. The reason why Yin Zhongyang had ended up in such a sorry state was most likely because of Zhuan, who was only a mid-stage venerable. Because there were only 4 people who had entered the heavenly exalted Iron Man cave. Apart from Yuan Zhao, Palm Tree, and Yin Zhongyang, there was only Zhuan. That Zhuowen isn't simple at all. He actually managed to put Yin Zhongyang in such a sorry state. Thinking of this possibility, even Qingdong felt a chill in his heart. It was already terrifying for a venerable to jump 2 levels and enter the heavenly exalted Iron Man cave, but that Zhuowen had even managed to chop off one of Yin Zhongyang's arms. This wasn't a matter of whether or not it was terrifying, but it was too abnormal. Crown Prince, with your strength, you shouldn't have ended up in such a sorry state when you entered the heavenly exalted Iron Man cave, right? Blue Smoke came to Yin Zhongyang's side and asked respectfully. Yin Zhongyang's eyes were extremely cold as he shot a cold glance at Blue Smoke and said, I don't need you to lecture me on my matters. Get lost. Blue Smoke's expression froze for a moment before a warm smile appeared on his face. He cupped his hands and said, Since Crown Prince doesn't want to see Blue Smoke naturally won't fly around in front of Crown Prince like a housefly. After saying that, Blue Smoke landed on the other side of Yin Zhongyang. His eyes flickered with a cold light. Yuan Zhao, your Alcate Holy Dynasty is rich in gold fragmented liquid. Can you give me some? Yin Zhongyang suddenly turned his head and asked Yuan Zhao, who wasn't far away. The corners of Yuan Zhao's mouth rose slightly as he said indifferently, Of course. However, I have a request. If you agree to it, I will give you a bottle of gold fragmented liquid. Speak, Yin Zhongyang said coldly. What I'm curious about is, what did you encounter in the heavenly honorable Iron Man cave? How did you end up in such a sorry state? If you tell me about it, I can give you the gold fragmented liquid, Yuan Zhao said calmly. Yin Zhongyang snorted coldly and hesitated for a moment before saying, All right. Actually, there's nothing much to say. I was just unlucky enough to encounter the blood soul tree inside. After a fierce battle, that bastard took the initiative, so I ended up in such a sorry state. Yin Zhongyang was arrogant and unruly, and thought highly of himself. If he were to reveal that his current sorry state was caused by a demonic youth at the intermediate stage of the venerable stage, he would definitely become a laughingstock. Therefore, he would not reveal the truth. The blood soul tree? No wonder you ended up in such a sorry state. That thing isn't easy to deal with. It's amazing that Brother Yin was able to escape. Yuan Zhao nodded, and a palm-sized jade bottle appeared in his right hand. He tossed it to Yin Zhongyang and said, Based on our friendship, I'll give you a discount on this bottle of gold fragmented liquid. It only costs 1 million high-grade spirit stones. Yin Zhongyang received the jade bottle, and was about to use it when he heard Yuan Zhao's words. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood. The market price of this gold fragmented liquid was only 500,000 high-grade spirit stones, but this Yuan Zhao actually asked for 1 million high-grade spirit stones. He was clearly taking advantage of the situation to extort him. What? Brother Yin, do you think this price is inappropriate? If not, you can return the gold fragmented liquid to me, Yuan Zhao said meaningfully. There's nothing inappropriate about it. The price is just right. However, my spirit ring and my arm were taken away by the blood soul tree, so I don't have so many high-grade spirit stones on me. After we enter the outer court, I'll ask the people of the Blue Whale Holy Court to bring you the spirit stones, Yin Zhongyang said through gritted teeth. Now that the situation was pressing, Yin Zhongyang had no choice but to swallow this loss. However, in his heart, he already hated that demonic youth. Sure, as long as Brother Yin doesn't go back on his word, Yuan Zhao said magnanimously, then I'll have to thank Brother Yuan. Yin Zhongyang nodded, and took out the bottle stopper without hesitation. He poured the gold fragmented liquid on his severed arm. Then, to everyone's surprise, Yin Zhongyang's severed arm miraculously grew a new arm. This scene was exactly the same as when Yuanqing's severed arm grew back on the boundless sailboat. Both of them had used the same miraculous gold fragmented liquid. The conversation between Yin Zhongyang and Yuan Zhao was naturally heard by everyone in the surroundings. They also knew why Yin Zhongyang was in such a sorry state. It was because he encountered the blood soul tree. No wonder he was in such a state. Everyone knew how difficult it was to deal with the blood soul tree. Without extraordinary means, it was easy to be corroded to death by the blood soul tree. The 4 old men behind the dean looked at each other and nodded. Then, The thin and tall old man said in a clear voice. The second stage of the test ends here. Those who should have come out should have come out. As for those who didn't come out, they should have died in the Iron Man cave. Although this old man feels that it's a pity, the path of martial arts is like this. The strong live, the weak die. So, Chapter 979. The last figure. Whoosh. The sound of something breaking through the air resounded like muffled thunder in the valley. The expression of the skinny old man, who was originally speaking, stiffened slightly, and his brows furrowed slightly. Being interrupted while he was speaking was extremely uncomfortable for anyone. Another person came out of the Heavenly Honorable Metal Man cave? What's going on? Aren't there only 3 Heavenly Honorable monsters? Am I seeing things? Or am I hallucinating? Whoosh! 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 Everyone's gaze followed the sound of something breaking through the air, and landed on the figure that came out of the Heavenly Honorable Metal Man cave. Everyone froze. Even the 2 monsters, Yuan Zhao and Pom Pom, were stunned and frowned. The dean, who had been calm and collected, suddenly had a flash of light in his deep eyes as he stared at the figure that had just appeared. The tall and skinny old man, and the other 3 old men, were also looking at the figure. The tall and skinny old man originally wanted to curse, but when his gaze completely focused on the figure, he was completely stunned. The main reason why everyone was stunned was that the figure that came out of the Heavenly Honorable Metal Man cave didn't have a strong aura. Not to mention a Heavenly Honorable. His aura wasn't even comparable to a Golden Honorable. He was only a late-stage Supreme Being. Is this a joke? A Supreme Being actually came out of the Heavenly Honorable Metal Man cave? Don't tell me that a Supreme Being can also pass through the Heavenly Honorable Metal Man cave. That's simply unrealistic. After a long silence, all the martialists in the valley were in an uproar. Their gazes were fixed on the figure in front of them, trying to see through him. The last person to appear at the entrance of the Metal Man cave was none other than Zhuowen. Ever since he made use of the energy from the heart of the Blood Soul Tree to advance to the late-stage Supreme Being realm, Zhuowen had been constantly shuttling through the Metal Man cave. Although he had found some good resources in the process, they couldn't be compared to the heart of the Blood Soul Tree. It could be said that Zhuowen's greatest gain in the Metal Man cave was the heart of the Blood Soul Tree. In addition, Zhuowen's breakthrough was delayed by half a day. Therefore, Zhuowen came out later than Yun Zhongyang. It's that brat. That brat really entered the Heavenly Honorable Metal Man cave and came out safely. This brat. The 4 old men looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Back then, when Zhuowen insisted on entering the Heavenly Honorable Metal Man cave, the skinny old man tried to persuade him. However, because of Zhuowen was stubborn, the 4 old men were embarrassed and left without caring if Zhuowen was alive or dead. But now, Zhuowen's appearance was like a slap to the 4 old men's faces. Of course, the 4 old men were most shocked by the fact that Zhuowen had broken through the Heavenly Honorable Metal Man cave with his sovereign cultivation. Since the Supreme Being, the Supreme Being, able Supreme Being, a Supreme Being, Heavenly Suprion, on the Heavenly Honorable Supremon. If it was a Supreme Being realm genius from the outer court, it wouldn't be strange for him to pass through the Heavenly Honorable Metal Man cave. After all, after being nurtured by the outer court, the martialists would undergo a certain transformation. Therefore, it wouldn't be surprising for a Supreme Being realm Supreme Being to pass through the Heavenly Honorable Metal Man cave. However, the person before them was a new student that had not been nurtured by the excellent Divine Academy. He was like an unpolished jade that had not been polished. Yet, he was able to pass through the Heavenly Honorable Metal Man cave as a Supreme Being realm Supreme Being. The 4 old men naturally knew what this meant. Although this youth wasn't the strongest amongst the new students, his potential was definitely the strongest. It's Big Brother Zhuowen. I didn't expect Big Brother Zhuowen to pass through the Heavenly Honorable Metal Man cave. He's really amazing. Kanan and Gatha were so excited that they clenched their fists tightly. It was as if they were the ones who had passed through the Celestial Metal Man cave, and not Zhuowen. Emo Lingtian and Xianxing were also indescribably shocked. The two of them exchanged a glance as a bitter smile appeared on their faces. It seemed like they had still underestimated Zhuowen. They truly didn't expect that this fellow would be so crazy. With his cultivation base at the Supreme Being realm, he had forcefully charged into the exalted celestial metal man cave, and even passed through it. It's actually that little bastard. Yuan Kong and Yuan Qing frowned slightly. They had not expected such an outcome. The three monstrous heavenly venerables, Yuan Zhao, Pom Pom, and Yin Zhongyang, finally lifted their heads and began to size up Zhuowen. Originally, supreme-level martialists were no more than ants in their hearts. They had never paid attention to supreme-level martialists, not even golden venerables. In a sense, the three of them stood at the top of the pyramid among the 30,000 newcomers. They didn't need to look at the people behind them, because they knew that the gap between them and the others would only grow wider. But now, the supreme being that they viewed as ants had actually followed their path and passed through the exalted celestial metal man cave. They were truly shocked. Among them, Yin Zhongyang frowned slightly as he stared at Zhuowen in doubt. He muttered softly, "It's not that demonic youth? Then who was the demonic youth I met inside?" The demonic youth he had met in the cave had blood-red hair and blood-red eyes. However, the youth before him had black hair and black eyes. He also didn't have any demonic killing aura on him. The difference in temperament between the two was too great. It was unlikely that they were the same person. Therefore, Yin Zhongyang felt doubtful in his heart. The youth that had just appeared was also a supreme-level martialist. However, his cultivation seemed to be slightly stronger than the demonic youth. He was a late-stage supreme-level martialist. Zhuowen also noticed the gazes from the crowd in the valley. There wasn't much emotion on his face as he took a step forward and arrived beside Jia Nan and Gatha. Emo Lingtian and Xian Xing were also there. The instant Zhuowen landed beside Jia Nan and Gatha, Grand Lily, who was hidden in the crowd, also looked at Zhuowen. Is this the Zhuowen that the siblings were talking about? As expected, he only has the same name. It's impossible for the real Zhuowen to survive after falling into the spatial crack. Seeing the sallow-faced youth that had descended beside Jia Nan and Gatha, Grand Lily couldn't help but sigh in relief. Her heart also became much more relaxed. However, after relaxing, there was a trace of sadness in her heart. It was as if Grand Lily was a little disappointed after confirming that this person wasn't the real Zhuowen. In any case, her feelings were extremely complicated at this moment. She muttered in a low voice, "If that Zhuowen also came to take the test, I'm afraid that he wouldn't be much weaker than this person, right?" Thinking of this, Grand Lily's eyes became bewildered. She had actually sunk into a strange fantasy. "What's your name?" Suddenly the dean, who was originally calm and collected, opened his mouth and asked Zhuowen. Whoosh! The moment the dean opened his mouth, everyone in the valley immediately burst into an uproar. Their gazes were somewhat strange as they looked at Zhuowen. After a period of time, they naturally knew that the benevolent-looking old man in front of them was the dean of the entire outer court. Previously, when Yuan Zhao, Palm Tree, and Yin Zhongyang had appeared, the dean didn't bat an eyelid. Or rather, it could be said that he completely ignored the three monstrous heavenly venerables. However, when this little supreme being came out, he actually spoke for the first time. Didn't this mean that the dean valued this supreme being youth more than Yuan Zhao, Palm Tree, and Yin Zhongyang, the three monstrous heavenly venerables? Sure enough, when the dean spoke, Yuan Zhao, Palm Tree, and Yin Zhongyang's pupils shrank. The three of their gazes converged on Zhuowen as traces of coldness gushed out from them. Zhuowen naturally noticed the cold gazes of Yuan Zhao and the other two. He sneered in his heart and didn't show any signs of weakness. Instead, he cupped his hands towards the dean and said, "My name is Zhuowen." Earlier, when Emo Lingtian had reminded Zhuowen, he already knew that the benevolent-looking old man in front of him was the dean of the outer court. Furthermore, the dean's aura was terrifying, much more terrifying than Emperor Qing and Emperor Yan. He was at least a mid-level martial emperor. "Zhuowen, not bad, your performance was not bad. You were able to pass through the Heavenly Venerable's Metal Man Cave as a supreme being. You are the first one in so many batches of recruitment." The dean smiled and continued, If you are willing, I can let you directly enter the outer court and nurture you well. You won't need to go through the third test. Wow. The dean's words were undoubtedly like a heavy bomb that exploded in the hearts of the crowd. A continuous uproar rang out. What kind of joke was this? The third test was definitely much more difficult than the second test. However, the dean had actually allowed the youth in front of them to enter the outer court directly without going through the third test. However, everyone also knew that the Supreme Being youth was terrifyingly talented. After all, he had passed through the Heavenly Venerable's Metal Man cave as a Supreme Being. In other words, although the youth's cultivation was only at the Supreme Being realm, his combat strength was probably at the Heavenly Venerable's realm. There was probably no one present who could achieve this. The four old men's faces were filled with disbelief. Why was the dean acting so strangely today? Why did he openly allow the youth to enter the outer court? Moreover, he even planned to nurture the youth well. This had never happened before. Although the Supreme Being youth's talent and potential were indeed very strong, it was too much to directly recruit him without going through the test in front of so many people. Zhuowen was also extremely surprised. Recruiting him without going through the test and promising to nurture him well sounded very good. However, wasn't the dean treating him a little too well? Moreover, Zhuowen could faintly sense that the dean was treating him so well not because he had passed through the Heavenly Venerable's Metal Man cave as a Supreme Being, but because of another reason. As for what exactly it was, Zhuowen couldn't figure it out. Dean, your way of doing things is really biased. This will make many new students bitterly disappointed. Qi suddenly stood up and said. Qi had no choice but to stand up because he still had a bet with Chengdong. If he didn't guess wrongly, Zhuowen should be in the group that Chengdong was in charge of. If Zhuowen was promoted just like that, it was obvious that the newcomer king this time would undoubtedly be Zhuowen. Chapter 980. The edge of a treasured sword is Hon Qi knew that if Zhuowen was promoted to the outer court by the dean, the title of newcomer king would definitely fall on Zhuowen. After all, even Yuan Zhao, who was the most talented and powerful among the new students, didn't receive such treatment from the dean. Even if Yuan Zhao became the newcomer king, he wouldn't live up to his name. At that time, the bet between him and Chengdong would be useless. Chengdong frowned and stared coldly at Qi. How could he not know what Qi was thinking? He snorted and said, Qi, perhaps you still don't understand. Zhuowen is the first person in history to pass through the Heavenly Metal Man cave with a cultivation of the sovereign realm. Such talent is enough to be promoted to the outer court by the dean. Even the title of newcomer king belongs to Zhuowen. After all, he's only 20 years old, and his cultivation is only at the sovereign realm. If he's also at the Heavenly Venerable realm, he'll definitely crush all the new students. Qi's gaze was cold as he said indifferently, Chengdong, don't forget the rules of our Fine God Academy's enrollment. If the dean sets this precedent, what will the other new students think? The dean's smile faded as he glanced at Qi and said, Do I need you to advise me on something I've decided? Or are you the outer court's dean? Qi's expression changed slightly as he quickly cupped his hands and said, I wouldn't dare. Qi definitely doesn't have such thoughts. The dean grunted coldly, and then his gaze returned to Zhuowen as he said with a grin, Zhuowen, what do you think of my suggestion? With your talent, it's inevitable for you to enter the outer court. There's no need for another test. Zhuowen's gaze was calm as he cupped his hands and said respectfully, Thank you for your kindness, Dean. Zhuowen is extremely grateful. However, I can't accept a direct promotion. Whoosh! An uproar spread throughout the square as everyone stared at Zhuowen, as if they were looking at an idiot. This kid must be joking. The dean had personally invited him to enter the outer court, but this kid actually rejected it. Was his brain fried? The dean was taken aback and asked in astonishment, Since you're refusing, there must be a reason, right? Zhuowen's gaze was extremely calm from beginning to end. He asked in return, I would like to ask Dean, how can a treasured sword become sharp? Naturally, it needs to go through repeated polishing and forging before it can become a sharp treasured sword. The dean nodded and said without hesitation, The sharpness of a treasured sword is honed, and the fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. The path of a martial artist is a path that is accompanied by countless difficulties, life and death, and danger. Since you have stepped onto this path, then there should be no luck or shortcuts to take. I'm very happy to receive the dean's recognition. Furthermore, I don't need to take the test to enter the outer yard. That's a pleasant surprise. But this will only stimulate the laziness and ease in my heart, and will not do any good to my martial arts. At this point, Zhuowen slowly straightened his back as a powerful confidence burst out from his body. At this moment, although Zhuowen's cultivation was not high, his confidence in himself and his unyielding willpower deeply infected everyone. There were even many people who felt ashamed of their inferiority in their hearts. Previously, they had all yearned for Zhuowen's opportunity to directly enter the outer yard, but Zhuowen did not agree to it, and instead rejected it. This was because the youth standing in front of the dean had a true desire to pursue martial arts in his heart. Therefore, he treated all obstacles and difficulties as a kind of experience in tempering. How many people could have such a state of mind? The sharpness of a treasured sword is honed, and the fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. The dean muttered the poem that Zhuowen had just recited. His eyes were filled with a dense light. This young man's state of mind was truly extraordinary. No wonder he was able to pass through the heavenly exalted metal man cave as a mere supreme being. Haha, Zhuowen, your state of mind is very good. This is the state of mind a cultivator should have. Unyielding, and unflinching in the face of life and death. A cultivator should have this kind of determination and willpower to face difficulties and go against the current. Zhuowen's rejection did not cause the dean to be unhappy. Instead, he laughed heartily and praised Zhuowen. Junior Zhuowen's state of mind is indeed good. Your future is definitely limitless, Qi Ji said with excitement in his eyes. Previously, he had been worried that Zhuowen would agree, so he had gritted his teeth and refuted the dean. Now, Zhuowen had taken the initiative to reject the dean. This meant that the title of newcomer king was clear enough. Zhuowen's potential was indeed terrifying, but after all, he was only in the sovereign realm. On the other hand, Yuan Zhao's strength had reached the mid-stage of the heavenly venerable realm. So Qi Ji knew that Zhuowen's future achievements would definitely not be weak. However, this time, the title of newcomer king would definitely be Yuan Zhao. At that time, Chengdong's 9 twists rejuvenating pill would be his. Chengdong frowned slightly. He also did not expect that Zhuowen would actually reject the dean's invitation. Although he wanted to persuade Zhuowen, after listening to Zhuowen's words, Chengdong also knew that Zhuowen had made up his mind to reject the dean's invitation. Looks like we'll have to bleed a lot this time. Chengdong sighed and said somewhat helplessly. Zhuowen's talent and potential were strong, but in the end his cultivation was too weak. If Zhuowen was given a few years, he would definitely surpass Yuan Zhao. However, if he were to face Yuan Zhao now, it would probably be very difficult. This time, the title of newcomer king would definitely belong to Qi Ji. However, Chengdong did not regret it, especially after listening to Zhuowen's words. Chengdong had also thought it through. The path of martial arts was originally filled with trials and tribulations. Although he had lost the 9 twists rejuvenating pill, he could exchange it again in the future. He would just treat this as a form of training for himself. Since Zhuowen refused to enter the outer court directly, the dean naturally did not force him. Instead, he said loudly, "The second stage of the test is over. We can now begin the third stage of the test." As soon as the dean said this, everyone in the valley revealed excited expressions. They had gone through untold hardships to pass the first 2 stages of the test. Now they had finally reached the most crucial stage. The results of the third stage of the test would directly determine whether they stayed or left. It was also related to their future path of martial arts. Brother Zhua, the dean personally invited you to enter the outer court directly. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You actually refused. What a pity. Zhuowen returned to the side of the Jianan siblings. Emo Lingtian, who was standing behind him, said somewhat resentfully, "Brother Emo, everyone's choice is different. In my opinion, Only by fighting for what I want can I better prove myself. Otherwise, it will only become an obstacle on my path of martial arts. Zhuowen shook his head. Hearing this, Mo Lingtian's gaze was complicated. However, he also knew that Zhuowen had already made up his mind. Moreover, he had already rejected it. Therefore, there was no point in him saying anything more. He only felt that it was a pity. The third stage of the test is about to begin. Let's see what the third stage of the test is about. Zhuowen's gaze landed on the dean. His eyes were bright. He knew that the third stage of the test would be personally presided over by the dean. I'm afraid it won't be simple. The second stage of the test has already eliminated so many people. The third stage of the test will only be more brutal. Mo Lingtian said with a serious expression. Zhuowen nodded. More than 20,000 people had already been eliminated in the Iron Man Cave test. Therefore, the third stage of the test would definitely be more terrifying than the Iron Man Cave test. However, after going through the first two stages of the test, the remaining 7,000 warriors were considered the elites among the 30,000 people. Their combat power was extraordinary. At this moment, the dean stepped into the void. With a stomp of his right foot, a terrifying yuan power condensed and turned into a huge bare foot. This huge bare foot stomped fiercely in the middle of the valley. Suddenly, the entire valley shook violently. The sky collapsed and the earth cracked. Rise! The dean's dignified voice spread out. Then, everyone's pupils shrank as they realized that the entire valley had cracked open. Then, from the cracked valley, stone ramparts that towered into the sky surged out. Each rampart was tens of thousands of feet tall. The entire valley was enveloped by the walls. The environment inside began to dim, and most of the sunlight was blocked by the walls. When everyone's gazes landed on the walls, they were shocked to discover that there were beast heads of various shapes and sizes in the walls. These different beast heads had their mouths wide open and deep passageways existed in their mouths. This is the Thousand Beasts Grotto. In the grotto, there is a deep passageway. In this passageway, there is an even more difficult test. Your goal is to pass through the test in the grotto and reach the exit. For this test, you must reach the exit as quickly as possible. At the exit, there is a jade token with a ranking number carved on it. When you obtain that number, it will indicate your ranking. Remember, there are only 500 jade tokens at the exit. That is to say, only the top 500 have the right to come out with a jade token. Only these 500 people can obtain the right to enter the outer courtyard. At this point, the dean floated above the Thousand Beasts Grotto and quietly looked down at the crowd. Once the dean said that, the crowd nodded. It seemed that the third stage of the test was about ranking. Although the dean didn't go into detail, everyone knew that entering the outer courtyard would definitely bring benefits. The higher one's ranking was, the more benefits there would be. However, what made everyone nervous was that there were only 500 jade tokens at the exit of the Thousand Beasts Grotto, while there were more than 7,000 people here. In other words, at least 6,000 people would be eliminated. This kind of elimination rate was undoubtedly very high. Perhaps some of you with weaker cultivations will be worried that you won't be able to compete with cultivators with higher cultivations. However, you can rest assured that the Thousand Beasts Grotto will set its difficulty according to your cultivation. That is to say, the Thousand Beasts Grotto will increase its difficulty according to your cultivation. If you are a genius and possess strength that surpasses your cultivation, regardless of whether you are a mystique venerable or a sovereign, you will be able to quickly pass through the grotto's passageway. On the other hand, even if you have the cultivation of a heavenly venerable, if you don't possess strength that surpasses your cultivation, you will encounter many obstacles. Chapter 981. 10,000 Beasts Grotto. Alright. Everyone can choose their own grottos. There are almost 10,000 in the 10,000 Beasts Grotto, so there's more than enough for everyone, said the dean indifferently with a wave of his hand. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. As soon as the dean finished speaking, figures soared into the sky one after another. Over 7,000 people in the valley turned into streaks of shadows as they flew onto their chosen grottos. Piss off! A loud shout rang out, attracting the attention of quite a few people. A venerable realm cultivator had just occupied one of the beast heads at the very top. Before he could even warm his seat, Yin Zhongyang suddenly descended and shouted at him with an unruly gaze. The venerate youth's expression was ugly. He said, "The dean has already said that every grotto is the same. Moreover, there are almost 10,000 grottos in the 10,000 Beasts grotto. There's no need to fight over them, right?" Yin Zhongyang stood high and mighty as Yuan power gushed out from his right palm and viciously imprinted itself on that person's chest. With a poochie sound, that supreme being youth spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. The beast head grotto that he occupied was also taken by Yin Zhongyang. You really don't know the difference between life and death. You should be honored that this crown prince has taken a fancy to your grotto. You actually dare to talk nonsense in front of this crown prince. You are simply courting death. Yin Zhongyang indifferently glanced at the youth who had been sent flying and spoke indifferently. The youth landed miserably on the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as snow, but he did not refute Yin Zhongyang, which was a rare occurrence. Yin Zhongyang was much stronger than him, so he could only suffer in silence now that he was injured. The others narrowed their eyes and subconsciously distanced themselves from Yin Zhongyang. Ever since Yin Zhongyang left the grotto in such a sorry state, his actions had become even more domineering and unbridled. Although no one could stand by and watch, no one dared to criticize Yin Zhongyang. After all, he was one of the three monstrous heavenly sovereigns. His strength was not something they could compare to. If they dared to stand out, their fates would probably be very miserable. Yin Zhongyang is really domineering. He actually dares to openly take someone else's grotto, said Emo Lingtian with a frown. Yin Zhongyang's domineering actions had displeased him. This is someone else's business after all. It has nothing to do with us. We just need to do our own thing well, said Zhuan indifferently. Emo Lingtian nodded and continued. Brother Zhua, let's go up as well. There are 5 consecutive caves in the southeast corner. The 5 of us can go together. As he spoke, Emo Lingtian pointed towards the southeast corner. Following Emo Lingtian's finger, Zhuan also noticed that there were indeed 5 stone caves that were empty. The 5 of them could fit together. Then let's go together. Zhuan nodded and led Emo Lingtian, Jianan, Gatha, and Xinxing towards the 5 grottos in the southeast corner. However, the moment the 5 of them stepped into the grotto, a terrifying sound suddenly came from behind them. Zhuan's eyes narrowed. Just as he was about to turn around, Emo Lingtian had already taken a step forward and slammed his palm behind him. Dang! Dang! Emo Lingtian's expression changed slightly, and he actually retreated a few steps in the air. The figure that was originally behind him also retreated a few steps under Emo Lingtian's resistance. The 2 of them were evenly matched. Zhuan slowly turned his head and saw the face of the person who wanted to attack him from behind. It was the 3rd prince of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty, Yuansheng. Yuansheng was accompanied by 7 or 8 people. Yuan Kong was among them. The others should be the other geniuses of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty. However, Yuan Zhao was a maverick. He didn't follow the people of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty. Instead, he found a grotto and waited for it to open. You're quite vigilant. However, our Yaoguang Holy Dynasty has taken a liking to the grotto in front of you. If you don't want to suffer, you'd better get out of here. Yuansheng looked at Zhuan provocatively and said indifferently. At that time, Zhuan had chopped off his arm in public on the deck of the boundless ship, causing him to lose face. Yuansheng had already secretly hated Zhuan. Now that his eldest brother and second brother were here, he naturally didn't fear Zhuan at all. Moreover, Zhuan's feat of breaking through the heavenly venerate Iron Man grotto as a sovereign also made Yuansheng unhappy. Therefore, when Zhuan came out to choose a grotto, Yuansheng took the initiative and wanted to crush his spirit. Emo Lingtian came to Zhuan's side and stared coldly at Yuansheng. Yuansheng's strength wasn't bad. He was actually able to force Emo Lingtian to retreat. However, Emo Lingtian's strength wasn't weak either. Yuansheng didn't gain much advantage in the fight just now. Do you think I'll give it to you just because you like it? Who do you think you are? Zhuowen stared coldly at Yuanxing and said. As soon as these words came out, Yuanxing, Yuan Kong, and the other geniuses of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty revealed a trace of coldness in their eyes. Zhuowen was too arrogant. He knew that they were from the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty, but he still spoke so rudely. It was too rude. Yuanxing's eyes were as cold as ice. The corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a trace of white teeth, and he said, "You will know who I am soon." Then, Yuanxing took a step forward and instantly rushed towards Zhuowen. A golden scepter had appeared in his hand. He formed a seal with his right hand and muttered some incantations. Suddenly, a golden light gushed out and turned into a lifelike golden dragon. Zhuowen, your arrogance will eventually bring you a lot of trouble and misfortune. As for you passing through the heavenly sovereign Iron Man cave, I'm afraid it's also a kind of luck. I don't know what kind of method you used to luckily pass through. Now, I can immediately beat you back to your original state. Yuanxing's whole body was shining with golden light. He was standing on the golden dragon, and his chi had already reached the mid-golden venerable realm. It seemed that Yuanxing's harvest in the heavenly sovereign Iron Man cave was not bad. He had actually reached the mid-golden venerable realm from the early golden venerable realm. It was no wonder that he had come to provoke Zhuowen. Perhaps, in Yuanxing's opinion, after his cultivation had advanced, it would be difficult for Zhuowen to challenge him. Therefore, he had come to crush Zhuowen's spirit. The dean and the 4 old men in the valley did not stop them. They wouldn't care about this kind of personal grudge. Of course, this kind of fight couldn't be too excessive. If someone died, they would intervene. Otherwise, they would lose geniuses because of this. At this moment, the gazes of many cultivators in the Myriad Beast Grotto were gathered here. Especially when they saw Yuanxing shrouded in golden light, they all revealed looks of interest. Although Zhuowen had passed through the heavenly sovereign Iron Man cave as a sovereign and shocked everyone, there were even more people who were doubtful. After all, they hadn't seen Zhuowen pass through the heavenly sovereign Iron Man cave with their own eyes. If Zhuowen had relied on the power left behind by his elders, then it was possible for him to force his way into the heavenly sovereign Iron Man cave. After all, when Yuanxing had passed through the golden sovereign Iron Man cave, he had relied on the Emperor's aura to barely pass the test. Then Zhuowen might have a similar method. It was because of this suspicion that when Yuanxing made his move, everyone's gaze was on Zhuowen. They wanted to see how Zhuowen would deal with Yuanxing's attack. Under everyone's gazes, Zhuowen slowly took a step forward. A blood-red spear appeared in his hand. Then, he took a step forward and instantly passed by Yuanxing. At this moment, time seemed to stop. Because Zhuowen's speed was too fast, no one could see how Zhuowen had passed by Yuanxing. Boom! When Zhuowen returned to his original position, the golden dragon under Yuanxing's feet roared. It actually twisted and struggled a few times before instantly turning into countless rays of light. Yuanxing, on the other hand, was sent flying like a stray dog. His right arm had been cut off by Zhuowen once again. At this moment, blood was spurting out, and he was in an extremely sorry state. This scene was very similar to the scene on the boundless sailboat. Yuanxing's right arm had been cut off again, and it was because of someone. At this moment, Yuanxing was on the verge of going crazy and roaring angrily. He was unwilling, too unwilling. The first time, when he was in the early Golden Sovereign stage, he had fought with Zhuowen for a long time. Only then did Zhuowen manage to cut off his arm by a single move. Now his cultivation had made a breakthrough, and he had advanced to the middle stage of the Golden Exalt realm. He was also facing Zhuowen, but in just one move, his attack was broken, and his right arm was cut off by Zhuowen once again. Yuanxing did not expect to suffer twice at the hands of the same person. He did not even dare to believe it. The entire rock cave fell silent at this moment. Many warriors stared blankly at Yuanxing's sorry figure, who had been sent flying with his right arm cut off. Their eyes were filled with shock. Yuanxing had come with such an aggressive aura, but he had retreated like a stray dog. Sky Origin's eyes were gloomy. Even he did not expect that Yuanxing would be defeated so cleanly. It seemed that Zhuowen had not broken through the heavenly sovereign Iron Man cave by luck. It was possible that he had really relied on his own strength to break through. With a cold snort, Sky Origin flicked his sleeve, and a surge of yuan qi gushed out. He lifted Yuansheng, who had been sent flying, and brought him to his side. Looking at Yuansheng, who had lost an arm and his aura was weak, Sky Origin's face turned extremely ugly. In the distance, Yuan Zhao, who had already found the entrance of the rock cave, slowly opened his eyes. His gaze emitted a sharp light. You guys used the golden fragmented liquid to heal my third brother's right arm. I want to meet this arrogant brat. He dared to touch the people of my Yaoguang sacred dynasty. Until now, not many people have survived. After handing Yuansheng to the geniuses of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty behind him, Sky Origin took a step forward and swept towards Zhuowen. The coldness in his eyes intensified, and the aura of a peak golden sovereign surged out of his body like a mountain crushing down. Sky Origin has made his move. Mo Lingtian's pupils shrank, and his face turned ugly. The Yaoguang sacred dynasty was really hateful. They had come to provoke Zhuowen time and time again. It was really hateful. Sky Origin is not someone that Yuansheng can compare with. I wonder how many moves Zhuowen can take from Sky Origin. Yin Zhongyang said in an unruly voice. Sky Origin was also a monstrous genius whose strength far exceeded his cultivation base. Although he was only at the peak of the Golden Sovereign Realm, his battle strength had reached the early stage of the Heavenly Sovereign Realm. If he had challenged the Heavenly Sovereign Iron Man Cave, he would have had a high chance of passing it. However, for the sake of safety, Yuan Zhao had let Sky Origin choose the Golden Sovereign Iron Man Cave. Chapter 982. Zhan Yuankong Boom. Yuankong's eyes shone with an intense sharpness that could not be looked at directly. A terrifying aura surged out from his body and swept out. It turned into a raging river that surged and surged. Moreover, this aura was getting denser and denser, fiercer and fiercer. It was like a snowy mountain that had exploded, surging and rolling like an arrow leaving the bow, like a wild horse that had broken free of its reins, like a fierce tiger that had left the mountain. Rows of high wall-like waves whistled and roared with the momentum of toppling mountains and overturning seas. It looked extremely terrifying and frightening. What a terrifying aura. Yuankong's cultivation has definitely reached the peak of the Golden Exalt realm. Just his aura alone is so terrifying. His true battle prowess must be even more terrifying. Everyone's eyes narrowed when they saw Yuankong's long hair fluttering in the wind. The aura that Yuankong displayed was truly terrifying. It was even more terrifying than a peak Golden Exalt. It was very likely that Yuankong had already touched the barrier to the Heavenly Exalt realm. Given time, Yuankong should be able to break through to the Heavenly Exalt realm very quickly, and it definitely wouldn't take too long. Yuankong looked down at Zhuowen indifferently and said coldly, "You're very talented and have great potential. However, you show off too much. So I'm going to teach you a little lesson and let you know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is." Do you know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is? Do I need you to tell me what to do? I just want to ask you, are we very familiar with each other? Zhuowen asked indifferently. Yuankong's face stiffened. A cold light flickered in his eyes as he snorted coldly. Don't think that you're so full of yourself just because the dean has promoted you. There are many cultivators here who are stronger than you. You're not even on the same level as them. With that, Yuankong stomped his foot and instantly flew towards Zhuowen. He extended his right hand, and a huge claw that was several dozen meters long appeared. It flickered with a cold light as it slammed down, wanting to rip Zhuowen apart. Azure blood spear. A sea of blood gushed out from the void behind Zhuowen. The sound of blood flowing filled the entire space. Then Zhuowen swung his long spear. The sea of blood swirled and formed a gigantic blood vortex, which swallowed the gigantic claw. To everyone's surprise, Yuankong's terrifying claws did not last long in the whirlpool of blood before they were completely corroded by the energy of the blood sea. Boom! Zhuowen took a step in the air and swept up the boundless sea of blood. He swept towards Yuankong like a hot knife through butter. His long hair fluttered in the wind, accompanied by the surging sea of blood. His heroic spirit was indescribable. General momentum of heaven and earth. This kid's natural talent is really extraordinary. He actually comprehended the force of the heavens and the earth at the sovereign realm. However, this kid's spear force isn't very perfect, and it's full of mistakes. It still needs to be improved. Looking at Zhuowen surrounded by the sea of blood, the dean raised an eyebrow. He was a little surprised that Zhuowen could grasp the spear force of the heavens and the earth at such a young age. His talent was indeed not bad. However, the dean was a mid-level great emperor after all. His eyesight was much sharper than the average person. He could see that Zhuowen's spear force had many flaws. If an unpolished jade wanted to become a fine jade, it must be polished repeatedly. The dean knew that if Zhuowen successfully entered the academy, he would definitely become perfect. His strength would also grow rapidly, and he might even have the opportunity to enter the inner courtyard. General momentum of heaven and earth? Everyone could also see that the sea of blood energy Zhuowen used was extraordinary. They also recognized that it was a level higher than the power of concept, the general momentum of heaven and earth. In the valley, there were many who had comprehended the power of concept, but there weren't many who had grasped the power of the heavens and the earth. Currently, they knew that the myriad sword sex genius Pom Pom had grasped the sword force, but Yin Zhongyang had not. As for Yuan Zhao, he had hidden it too deeply. It was possible that he had grasped the general momentum of heaven and earth. It's actually the general momentum of heaven and earth. It seems like passing the Empyrean Iron Man grotto wasn't a fluke. Pom Pom's gaze was sharp as he muttered to himself in astonishment. Yin Zhongyang's eyes flickered as he stared at Zhuowen's blood spear. He was very familiar with this blood spear. Back then, the demonic youth had used this blood spear to cut off his right arm. That demonic youth is this guy. Bastard, the myriad beast grotto won't let you off easily this time. Yin Zhongyang's eyes were filled with dread. At the same time, there was a trace of resentment. He had to avenge his lost arm. However, if Zhuowen was really the demonic youth, he knew that he wasn't his opponent. He needed to plan his revenge carefully. At this moment, the Sea of Blood whirlpool had already arrived in front of Yuan Kong. The latter's pupil shrank, and he coldly snorted. He clawed at the void again, and a terrifying yuan power poured out. It turned into surging waves of energy that enveloped the Sea of Blood whirlpool like a sponge. CICICI. A strange sound rang out. The sponge-like energy completely enveloped the Sea of Blood whirlpool, causing it to freeze in the air. Explode. Yuan Kong spat out a single word. Then the sponge-like energy directly exploded. An earth-shattering explosion rang out, and the Sea of Blood actually collapsed under this energy. Whoosh! The moment the Sea of Blood whirlpool collapsed, a figure suddenly shot out. A blood-red light rushed out from the countless explosions, and instantly arrived in front of Yuan Kong. The blood-red light emitted from the tip of the spear was like a venomous snake at this moment. The angle of attack was extremely tricky. Sky Origin's expression changed drastically. With a flick of his finger, a bead that emitted a fiery red aura shot out. This bead was very strange. There were actually traces of purplish-black gas on the surface of the fiery red bead. Boom! A terrifying flame rushed out from the bead like a python and entangled Zhuowen's blood spear, causing it to freeze in the air. At the same time, the purple-black qi on the surface of the bead shot out with a swish, heading towards Zhuowen, who was at the end of the spear. It wanted to completely devour Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with fear as he stared at the purplish-black gas. He could sense that the purplish-black gas was extremely dangerous. Be careful. The purple-black qi contains extremely potent poison. Although your body is very tough right now, it will still be extremely troublesome if you come into contact with it. Xiao Hei's stern voice rang out in Zhuowen's head. Zhuowen also knew how terrifying the purple-black qi was with that, so he did not plan on provoking it. With a stomp of his foot, 3 pairs of lightning wings appeared on his back. He turned into a bolt of lightning and dodged the purple-black qi. You want to escape? Not a chance. Yuan Kong snorted coldly. His right hand rapidly formed a seal as he tapped the bead in his palm. The purple-black qi instantly turned into a huge purple-black python. It opened its huge fangs and pounced towards Zhuowen like a bolt of black lightning. Its speed was actually not any slower than Zhuowen, with his 3 pairs of lightning wings. Zhuowen was startled. The coldness in his eyes grew thicker. He tapped his forehead with his right hand and summoned the supreme dragon cauldron. A dragon's roar rang out and a dragon's might shot out. Its several 100-feet-long body blotted out the sun and instantly devoured the huge purple-black python. Swish! After the dragon's might devoured the huge black python, it swung its tail and instantly charged towards Yuan Kong, who held the fiery red bead. Its huge body came crashing down like a mountain, wanting to completely crush Yuan Kong. Yuan Kong's face darkened. He summoned the bead in his right hand. Immediately, his surroundings were enveloped by a sea of fire. The sea of fire then turned into countless flaming hands that grabbed the dragon's might. Rip! Countless flaming hands tore, and a terrifying power erupted. The dragon's might was unable to resist, and was directly torn to pieces. Let's see what other tricks you have. Burn! Yuan Kong snorted coldly. With a thought, countless flaming hands shot out and rushed towards Zhuowen from all directions. Raising his head slightly, Zhuowen calmly looked at the countless flaming hands that swooped down. His right hand held the supreme dragon cauldron, while his left hand slapped the base of the cauldron. Immediately, a dragon's roar gushed out again. Subsequently, a total of 81 dragons might flew out and intertwined with each other. It was a terrifying sight. Boom! 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 The dragon's might collided with the flaming hands, causing an earth-shattering explosion. Zhuowen instantly rushed out, bypassing the explosion, and arrived above Yuan Kong's head. He raised the blood spear above his head and ruthlessly swung it down. Bang! 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 The blood spear whistled through the air as it rubbed against the air. The power of the blood spear was like a rainbow piercing through the sun. Yuan Kong didn't expect Zhuowen to suddenly rush over at this moment, and was caught off guard. He raised his hands and the Yuan power in his body surged out, forming a protective shield. Crack! Unfortunately, this protective shield was too weak and couldn't even withstand a single blow. It instantly shattered, and Yuan Kong spat out a mouthful of blood under this attack and fell down. This guy. After falling 100 meters, Yuan Kong twisted his waist and barely stabilized his body. He gritted his teeth and cursed. He raised his head to look for Zhuowen's figure, only to discover that the place where Zhuowen was just now was empty. Where are you looking? An indifferent voice sounded from Yuan Kong's back, causing the latter's hair to stand on end. Just as he was about to turn around, a blood spear heavily smashed into his chest like a whip. Poochie! Yuan Kong spat out a mouthful of blood. He didn't even see Zhuowen's figure behind him, before he fell down again, without any strength to resist. Rumble! A deep pit formed at the bottom of the myriad beast grotto. Yuan Kong lay in the center of the pit, constantly coughing and struggling as blood flowed from the corners of his mouth. The spectators all fell into a strange silence. Their gazes were focused on Yuan Kong in the pit below, their faces filled with disbelief. Sky Origin was a martialist at the peak of the Golden Venerate realm. It was understandable that a Yuan sage had been defeated by Zhuowen, but even Sky Origin had been defeated. Everyone finally believed that Zhuowen indeed had the combat strength of a heavenly Venerate. What a freak! He's clearly only a sovereign, but he can beat the peak Golden Exalt Yuan Kong into such a state. This kid already has the strength of an Empyrean. It looks like passing the Empyrean Iron Man Grotto wasn't a fluke. Chapter 983. Entering the Myriad Beast Grotto. Swoosh! Zhuowen suddenly fell from the sky, arriving above the pit in an instant. Afterward, he stepped on Sky Origin King's chest and looked down at him coldly. He said coldly, "You said before that you wanted me to know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is. Now that I've stepped on you, how are you going to show me how high the sky is and how deep the earth is?" Sky Origin King only felt pain in his chest. He originally wanted to struggle to his feet, but now that Zhuowen had stepped on him, he fell heavily to the ground. He vomited another mouthful of blood as he howled out miserably. His eyes were filled with fear. How was Zhuowen so terrifying? Although he was a peak Golden Exalt, he possessed the power to put up a fight against early heavenly exalts at the very least. However, he had been defeated and stepped on by Zhuowen. Yuansheng, who was still healing, noticed everyone's expressions as well as the strange atmosphere in the surroundings. He frowned slightly. Yuanqing tilted his head slightly and looked down. Afterward, he saw something that he would never forget. His second brother, Sky Origin King, was currently lying in the pit in an extremely miserable shape. A figure stood on Sky Origin King's body, as if he was the ruler of the world. He was no stranger to the figure that stood on Sky Origin King. It was Zhuowen, who had severed his arms twice. This guy actually defeated second brother, Yuanqing murmured to himself as his lips trembled. Sky Origin King felt extremely humiliated. Zhuowen was just too impudent. After defeating him, Zhuowen actually stood on him and used words to humiliate him. Although he really wanted to get up and resist, it was a pity that Zhuowen's right foot was firmly planted on his chest, causing him to be unable to get up. Instead, because of his struggle, Zhuowen's foot was even stronger, causing him to become even weaker. You said before that you wanted to teach me a lesson, acting all high and mighty. Why aren't you doing anything now? Zhuowen stomped down once more as the coldness in his eyes became even denser. Enough! A chilling voice suddenly rang out. Then, a terrifying energy descended from the sky like a mountain, sweeping toward Zhuowen's back in an instant. It wanted to pierce through and shatter Zhuowen. Zhuowen frowned slightly. The power coming from behind him was so terrifying that even he felt a little apprehensive. With a cold snort, the 3 pairs of lightning wings on Zhuowen's back suddenly spread open. He turned into an ethereal lightning and disappeared from where he stood in an instant. At this moment, Zhuowen finally saw clearly that the terrifying force behind him was actually an enormous palm of essence energy that was several hundred meters in size. Zhuowen's speed was too fast, and this several hundred-meter palm of essence energy struck nothing but air. Then the palm sucked toward the crater, and Yuan Kong, who was lying in the crater, was sucked into the palm. Then Yuan Kong was brought into the palm. Whoosh! Dozens of meters away, a lightning flashed and revealed Zhuowen's figure. Then, Zhuowen raised his head and saw the owner of the palm of essence energy. It was the Alcade Holy Dynasty's crown prince Yuan Zhao. Yuan Zhao waved his right hand and directed the palm of essence energy to place Yuan Kong, who was in a sorry state, beside the Alcade Holy Dynasty's people. Then he stomped his foot and flew in the air. When he was dozens of meters away from Zhuowen, Yuan Zhao looked down at Zhuowen. There was a trace of gloomy qi between his eyebrows as he said, Yuanqing is my third brother, and Yuan Kong is my second brother. You cut off my third brother's arm, and trampled on my second brother's dignity. Do you think I don't exist? Yuan Zhao is going to flip out. Everyone stared fixedly at Yuan Zhao. It seemed like Zhuowen had gone too far. He was starting to anger the crown prince of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty. In everyone's mind, Yuan Zhao was undoubtedly the most mysterious of the 3 monstrous celestial masters. He was also the most powerful of them all. At least, his cultivation level was the highest among the 3, reaching the middle stage of the celestial master realm. Moreover, with the background of the Brilliance Holy Dynasty, Yuan Zhao probably still had some hidden cards up his sleeve. He would have no problem fighting against a late-stage celestial master. This was a true monster, a proud son of the heavens. Although he looked ordinary, if he was truly enraged, then he would reveal his sharpness and become unstoppable. Therefore, after seeing Yuan Zhao's attack, everyone was looking forward to seeing how strong Yuan Zhao was. As for Zhuowen, he was overlooked by everyone at this moment. Although Zhuowen's combat strength was terrifying and could rival a heavenly venerate, he was at most comparable to an early heavenly venerate. It was impossible for him to reach the middle heavenly venerate. Yuan Zhao was at the middle holy master realm. Needless to say, his combat strength had surpassed the middle holy master realm. If Zhuowen really fought against Yuan Zhao, he would undoubtedly die. The reason why everyone was looking forward to the battle was because they were looking forward to seeing how strong Yuan Zhao was. How strong would he be if he could kill Zhuowen in a few moves? It seems that Zhuowen is dead for sure. I wonder how many moves Yuan Zhao will use to kill him. In the Thousand Beasts Grotto, countless eyes were focused on Yuan Zhao. They were all looking forward to Yuan Zhao's attack. Zhuowen slowly raised his head and met Yuan Zhao's cold gaze. He said indifferently, I originally had no enmity with your Alcade holy dynasty. However, your so-called third prince has been making things difficult for me. Originally, we could have just chosen a grotto peacefully. However, that trash Yuanqing insisted on snatching it from me. He even took the initiative to provoke me. I had already chopped off one of his arms, but he still came looking for a beating. Isn't this kind of person a masochist? As for Yuan Kong, he wanted to teach me a lesson and let me know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is. However, he didn't expect to be trampled under my feet. In the end, I taught him a lesson. I want to ask you, isn't this considered legitimate self-defense? Why is it a provocation in your eyes? The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled up as the ridicule in his eyes deepened. Yuan Zhao's gaze was still indifferent as he said, I only saw that you chopped off my third brother's arm and trampled on my second brother's dignity. You are provoking my Alcade holy dynasty. This reason is enough for me to take action. After saying that, Yuan Zhao's qi became extremely terrifying. Countless streams of energy erupted like a volcano and formed a huge funnel-shaped spiral. The terrifying qi began to revolve around Yuan Zhao's body. Yuan Zhao's clothes and hair fluttered as he stood in the middle of the terrifying qi. He looked like a god who had descended to the mortal world. His qi was like a tiger, and his qi was like a dragon. As expected, he's a mid-stage heavenly venerable. Yuan Zhao is so terrifying. His cultivation completely overshadowed Yun Zhongyang and Pom Pom. An uproar continuously sounded when they sensed the terrifying aura from Yuan Zhao's body. Everyone's eyes were somewhat dazed as they stared at Yuan Zhao, who was surrounded by countless forces, while their faces twitched. Yun Zhongyang and Pom Pom's expressions didn't look good. Although they had guessed that Yuan Zhao was hiding his cultivation, they were still a little depressed when their guess became reality. If Yuan Zhao's cultivation was only at the early stage of the heavenly venerable realm, the two of them might be able to compete with Yuan Zhao for the title of newcomer king. Unfortunately, Yuan Zhao's cultivation was actually at the middle stage of the heavenly venerable realm. Now you have a chance. Kneel down and slap yourself 50 times to apologize to my second brother and third brother. If you do, I will spare your life and only cut off one of your arms, said Yuan Zhao indifferently. Zhuowen raised his head, and a terrifying demonic qi began to surge out of his body. Above Zhuowen's head, there were rolling demonic clouds. The powerful demonic qi almost covered the entire grotto. Zhuowen's eyes gradually turned blood red. His black hair began to turn blood red. A monstrous demonic qi continued to roll out. What a powerful demonic qi. Is Zhuowen a demonic cultivator? How can his body emit such a terrifying demonic qi? Everyone's attention was originally on Yuan Zhao, but now they were attracted by the demonic qi in Zhuowen's body. They couldn't help but look over. When they saw Zhuowen's strange blood-red eyes and hair, they were all stunned. This Zhuowen actually showed signs of turning into a devil. This kid was actually a devil cultivator? Creak. It is indeed this bastard. The demonic cultivator in the heavenly venerable's grotto was Zhuowen. Yun Zhongyang clenched his fists, making cracking sounds. His gaze was cold as he looked down at Zhuowen, who seemed to have become a demonic cultivator. Yuan Zhao looked down in surprise at Zhuowen, who was emitting a monstrous demonic qi. Clearly, he didn't expect Zhuowen's body to contain such a terrifying demonic qi. Just as Zhuowen and Yuan Zhao released their auras, and a battle was about to break out, a dignified voice rang out. The third phase of the test will now begin. You can settle your grudges after the third phase of the test. Now enter the Thousand Beasts Grotto. The dignified voice came from the dean. He had long noticed that Yuan Zhao was a mid-heavenly venerable. However, he hadn't expected Zhuowen to possess such a powerful demonic qi. Yuan Zhao's expression was a little sluggish. He turned his head and glanced at the dean. The terrifying aura around his body began to slowly recede as he said to Zhuowen in an indifferent manner, Your luck is not bad. I will let you live for a while longer. After this test is over, perhaps you will become a skeleton. That may not be the case. Zhuowen also withdrew the demonic might from his body. His blood-red hair and blood-red eyes also began to slowly recede, returning to normal black hair and black eyes. His voice was filled with indifference. Yuan Zhao ignored Zhuowen and returned to his grotto. On the other hand, Zhuowen came to Jianan and Gatha's side. They stood together in the southeast grotto, silently waiting for the grotto's door to open. Due to the dean's intervention, the people from the Alcade sacred dynasty didn't say much. However, Yuanxing and Yuan Kong's faces were extremely ugly. They had lost a lot of face this time. The two brothers had been trampled on by a supreme great ant in front of so many people. Furthermore, they couldn't get back at him. One could imagine how depressed they were. Zhuowen's weapon is also a blood-red spear. Could it be a coincidence? In another corner of the grotto, Grand Lily's beautiful eyes fell on Zhuowen. Her eyes were filled with doubt, because Zhuowen from the Qingxian Empire also used a spear. Chapter 984. Station. There are countless spear users in this world. It's normal for it to be coincidental. Grand Lily shook her head, and no longer paid any attention to the high-spirited Zhuowen. However, the image of Zhuowen in her mind became increasingly clear, and could not be erased. Open the grotto. Remember, reach the end of the grotto as quickly as possible. There are over 7,000 of you, and only 500 jade tokens. If you want to enter the outer academy, you can only run forward with all your might. Do not hesitate or stop, because that will only hinder your progress. The dean waved his sleeve after saying these meaningful words. Over 7,000 glowing dots flew out from his hand, and headed towards the Thousand Beasts Grotto. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The glowing dots landed on the stone doors of the grotto. Soon after, the several feet tall thick stone doors slowly rose with a rumbling sound, revealing the deep tunnel behind them. Looking at the tunnel behind the grotto, the numerous practitioners standing at the entrance of the grotto revealed a heated look in their eyes. With a stomp of their feet, they rushed into the tunnel and quickly disappeared. Zhuowen, I will also leave first. See you at the exit. Mo Lingtian and Xian Xing cupped their hands together towards Zhuowen. With a stomp of their feet, they also entered the grotto. Jianan Gatha, let's go. The Thousand Beasts Grotto test is actually a race against time. Whoever reaches the exit first will obtain a spot to enter the outer academy. Let's go. Zhuowen turned his head and looked at the other two siblings in the grotto as he spoke. Jianan and Gatha nodded. Without wasting any time, they entered their own tunnels. Zhuowen wasn't willing to be outdone. At the instant the siblings entered the passageway, he transformed into an ethereal breeze like a ghost and disappeared into the darkness of the passageway. Let's go to the exit of the Thousand Beasts Grotto and wait for the results. The dean was expressionless. With a wave of his sleeve, he flew towards the wall where the Thousand Beasts Grotto was located. The exit of the Thousand Beasts Grotto was at the top of the wall. Whoever came out first would obtain the corresponding quota. At the top of the barrier, there was a rather large station. The principal brought the four elders, Qi Ji, Hu Jia, and Cheng Dong, and landed on the station. Not far from the station, there was a huge beast head. This beast's head was dozens of feet long. It looked like a tiger, but it wasn't a tiger. It looked like a dragon, but it wasn't a dragon. It gave people a strange feeling. The mouth of this beast head was wide open, and in its mouth was a deep tunnel. It was pitch black inside, as if it led to the abyss of hell. This was the exit of the Myriad Beasts Grotto. When the time came, the dean and the others would know who would be able to obtain the top 500 spots. Dean. The people outside the valley who are related to the test are all here. Should we get rid of them? The skinny elder seemed to have noticed the crowd outside the valley. His gaze turned cold as he whispered to the dean. The 4 sacred empires and the 3 great sects have sent Emperor Realm experts. There are even some Emperor Realm experts from other empires. Since the participants have already entered the grotto, it's fine to let them wait at the entrance. However, only Emperor Realm experts are allowed to enter. Don't let anyone else in. The dean said indifferently. The skinny and tall old man nodded. Immediately, he turned into a ray of light and rushed out of the valley. After exchanging a couple of words outside the valley, over a dozen figures with powerful auras followed the skinny and tall old man to the station. These figures were all Emperor Realm experts. There were old men, young and strong men, and gentle scholars. In any case, These Emperor Realm experts all had different appearances. However, there was one thing they all had in common. The aura of these great emperors was extremely terrifying. If one looked closely, one could see the illusory stars surrounding them. This was the power of the stars that only great emperors could control. Emperor Qing of the Qing Xian Empire and Emperor Yan of the Yan Xian Empire were among these figures. However, the two of them kept a low profile. They were only Emperor Realm experts from remote empires. There was still a gap between them and the Emperor Realm experts from the 4 empires and 3 great sects. Although Emperor Qing was an outer sect elder of the Azure Dragon main palace, this was an insignificant position in the main palace. He didn't have any right to speak. Therefore, Emperor Qing didn't dare to offend the Emperor Realm experts from the 4 empires and 3 great sects. When the results of the second round came out, they were stopped outside the valley by the people from the outer sect. Although they knew the results of the second round, they couldn't get close. Now that they were able to get close, it was a pleasant surprise. Dean, thank you for allowing us to enter the Myriad Beast Grotto. A middle-aged man with an imposing appearance smiled as he cupped his hands and smiled at the dean who was standing on the stage. Another man of similar age stood behind the middle-aged man. Both of them had a faint golden glow on their bodies. They looked extremely dazzling. It was obvious that the two of them had a close relationship. They should be Emperor Realm experts from the same faction. Supreme Jean, there's no need to be so courteous. I think the Alcate Sacred Dynasty is really full of talented people. The 3 princes who participated in the test are quite talented. They should be able to enter the outer sects smoothly. The dean nodded and smiled. It turned out that the Emperor Realm expert named Supreme Jean and the middle-aged man behind him were both from the Alcate Sacred Dynasty. It was no wonder that the other Emperor Realm experts looked at them with great fear. Supreme Jin's eyes were filled with pride when he heard the dean's praise. However, he was very humble and said that the 3 princes still had many shortcomings. Full of talented people? I don't think so. An eccentric voice rang out. Supreme Jin's expression turned cold as he focused his gaze on a feminine man with long blue hair, who was dressed in blue robes. Supreme Jin, what do you mean? Are you trying to say that the 2 trash from your Blue Whale Sacred Dynasty are a match for the princes of our Alcate Sacred Dynasty? Not to mention the blue smoke, even your Blue Whale Sacred Dynasty's crown prince, Yin Zhongyang, is no match for Yuan Zhao. Supreme Jin said coldly. It turned out that the eccentric Blue Emperor was from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. The other Monarch Realm experts didn't interrupt. These 2 holy dynasties were the top 2 powers among the 4 holy dynasties, and they often had conflicts with each other. It could be said that when people from the Alcate Sacred Dynasty and the Blue Whale Sacred Dynasty met, it was inevitable that they would quarrel. In the worst case, they would even fight. Supreme Jin's face turned cold and he sneered. Then why did I see your Alcate Sacred Dynasty's 3rd prince, Yuansheng, and 2nd prince Yuankong, being defeated by a supreme being ant? If I'm not mistaken, your Alcate Holy Dynasty's 3rd prince lost an arm, and your 2nd prince was trampled under his feet. Are these the so-called geniuses of your Alcate Sacred Dynasty? I think they're just undeserving of their reputation. They can't even deal with a supreme being. Supreme Jin narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "What are you trying to say?" What Supreme Emperor Lan had said was indeed an extremely humiliating thing for Supreme Emperor Jin. The 2nd prince and the 3rd prince had both been defeated by a single person. Moreover, that person was only a supreme being. This was a slap in the face for the Alcate Sacred Dynasty. Supreme Jin chuckled and said, "I'm not trying to say anything. I just don't think the people of your Alcate Sacred Dynasty are that great. Moreover, I'm more curious about which faction that Supreme Being Ant is from. He can actually defeat a peak golden venerable. This isn't something that anyone can do. I really do want to know which power that little ant belongs to." Supreme Jin then looked at the other martial emperors behind him. Other than those from the 4 dynasties and 3 sects, there were only 2 other martial emperors from other factions. They were Supreme Emperor Qing and Supreme Emperor Yan. Supreme Emperor Yan and Supreme Emperor Qing frowned when they sensed Supreme Jin's gaze. They did not expect Supreme Jin to target them. Did one of you bring him out? Supreme Jin asked indifferently. The Alcade Sacred Dynasty was very powerful outside of the 9 underworlds. It was far more powerful than the other empires. Therefore, Supreme Jin's words were quite intimidating. Supreme Jin was also a 3rd-level martial emperor. He was considered an outstanding existence among the group of people. Supreme Emperor Qing shook his head and said, Supreme Jin, please don't misunderstand. Only one person from the Qing Empire has entered the 3rd stage of the test. She's a woman. The Supreme Being young man is not from the Qing Empire. If he's not from the Qing Empire, then he must be from the Yin Xian Empire? Supreme Jin's eyes were very sharp. When he mentioned Zhuowen, Supreme Emperor Yan's eyes flickered. Supreme Emperor Yan definitely knew who Zhuowen was. Supreme Jin, I didn't ask you to come here to listen to your interrogation. I asked you to wait patiently for the results of the 3rd stage of the test. Can you be quiet? The dean frowned and a terrifying aura gushed out. Supreme Jin's face stiffened, and he quickly cupped his fists and said, I was rude just now. I was just curious about the Supreme Being's identity. I wonder if the dean can give me some pointers? The dean of the Outer Court of the Excellent Gods Institute was very strong, even stronger than the strongest emperor realm expert of the Alcade Holy Dynasty. In addition, he had the backing of the Excellent Gods Institute, so Supreme Jin didn't dare to offend him. The dean frowned and said indifferently, That Supreme Being's name is Zhuowen. He's very talented, and I've taken a fancy to him. Are you planning to touch him? Supreme Jin's gaze froze. Since the dean had made his intentions clear, Supreme Jin knew what the dean was trying to do. After saying a few words, he did not dare to say another word. He never thought that the Supreme Being's talent would be recognized by the Dean of the Outer Institute. After all, the Dean of the Outer Institute was an extremely picky person. He would never take a fancy to a mediocre person. His name is Zhuowen? Supreme Emperor Qing was stunned and he frowned. Could it be that he had the same name? The monstrous Supreme Stage genius that stood out in this recruitment test was actually also called Zhuowen. Chapter 985. Water Ghost Swoosh. Zhuowen traversed through the pitch-black passageway like a ghost. Soon, he arrived at a rather spacious hall. Splash splash. The sound of flowing water continuously resounded throughout the entire hall. Zhuowen surveyed his surroundings, only to discover that the surroundings of the hall were actually enveloped by countless streams of water. There were 10 stone dragon heads on the surrounding rock walls, and streams of water gushed out from their mouths. The 10 streams of water transformed into 10 waterfalls that hung upside down in the surroundings of the hall. Moreover, the entire floor of the hall had already been enveloped by the surging water, so much so that it practically reached Zhuowen's waist. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and took a step forward. Yuan power covered the bottom of his feet, causing him to stand on the water surface as though he was walking on flat ground. Subsequently, Zhuowen walked to the center of the hall, his gaze converging on the 10 stone dragon heads that hung high up in the surroundings of the hall. The surface of the 10 waterfalls was as smooth as a mirror, and all of them reflected Zhuowen's figure. It was as though 10 identical Zhuowen had appeared in the surrounding rock hall in an instant. Zhuowen frowned slightly as he gazed at the 10 waterfalls that reflected his figure. He could faintly feel that this hall was not ordinary. In particular, the figures reflected by the 10 waterfalls were really too realistic. They were so realistic that Zhuowen felt that they were not shadows, but real people. What a strange stream of water. The figure reflected by it is actually so clear. As he muttered to himself, Zhuowen lowered his head to look at the reflection in the water below his feet. Their eyes met, and he actually felt that the eyes of the reflection in the water actually contained a strange emotion. There are emotions in the eyes of the reflection? Could it be that I am hallucinating? As he muttered to himself, Zhuowen squatted down and slowly extended his right hand to touch the reflection in the water below his feet. The instant the right hand in reality touched the left hand in the reflection, pillars of water abruptly shot up from the originally calm water surface. Subsequently, Zhuowen discovered that his right hand was being held. Lowering his head to look at the reflection in the water, Zhuowen discovered that the reflection in the water actually revealed a strange smile towards him. On the other hand, Zhuowen himself did not smile, while the left hand of the reflection tightly gripped Zhuowen's right hand. The smile on the reflection's face grew even stranger. "Who are you?" Zhuowen's gaze was eerily cold as he asked. "I am you." The reflection of Zhuowen suddenly laughed in a strange manner. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of explosions suddenly resounded in the surroundings. Following that, the pillars of water that shot up from the water turned into countless anacondas that charged towards Zhuowen in the center of the water, wanting to swallow Zhuowen whole. Zhuowen wanted to dodge, but the reflection of Zhuowen in the water held on tightly to Zhuowen's arm, not allowing him to leave at all. This bastard, looking at the countless anacondas swarming towards him, as well as his own sinister smile in the reflection, Zhuowen cursed in his heart. The mental strength in his Naiwan palace surged out and surrounded Zhuowen's body. At the same time, the infinity sword formation surged out and turned into an impenetrable wall in front of him to protect him. Boom, boom, boom. The anacondas hissed and slammed heavily into the infinity sword formation, causing countless splashes of water to appear. It looked gorgeous and colorful, but Zhuowen was secretly complaining. The anacondas seemed to be endless as they surged out of the water endlessly and charged towards him. Although the infinity sword formation's defense was strong, it was unable to withstand the attack of the seemingly endless anacondas. Indeed, after a while, the impenetrable wall formed by the infinity sword formation finally showed signs of cracking. Kacha! A crisp sound rang out as the impenetrable wall formed by the infinity sword formation finally began to crack. This caused Zhuowen's gaze to change slightly. Sun furnace. Zhuowen no longer held back, as he immediately took out the sun furnace. Terrifying flames of the sun surged out and protected Zhuowen's body. Meanwhile, the cracked infinity sword formation was put away by Zhuowen. Fire and water were incompatible. Although the anacondas were violent, they were unable to break in with the sun fire blocking them. However, many anacondas were vaporized by the high temperature of the sun fire and turned into mist. Seeing that he had temporarily blocked the anaconda's attack, Zhuowen let out a sigh of relief. Then, he looked down at the reflection in the water and said coldly, "What exactly are you?" Zhuowen's expression in the reflection changed. He did not expect Zhuowen to be so strong that he could block the anaconda's attack so easily. He sneered and said, "Didn't I just say it? I'm you." Deliberately mystifying. "Break." Zhuowen sneered. His entire body was enveloped by countless golden lights as he grew 4 heads and 8 arms. A terrifying power spread out. It was so strong that it could lift a cauldron. In an instant he lifted Zhuowen from the water. Ao. Zhuowen's reflection clearly did not expect Zhuowen's strength to suddenly become so strong. He was caught off guard and was pulled out by Zhuowen. A strange roar sounded. Zhuowen focused his eyes and realized that the thing in his hand wasn't Zhuowen's appearance, but a blue humanoid creature. This creature had no facial features, only a head and simple limbs. It looked extremely strange. A water ghost. Looking at the strange creature in his hand, Zhuowen could not help but mutter to himself. He knew this creature. He had seen records of water ghosts in ancient books. It was said that this creature had no facial features, only a simple head and 4 limbs. Moreover, water ghosts were best at hiding in the reflection of other creatures in the water. They would attack the creatures the moment they let down their guard. From then on, the attacking creature would become their meal. "Looks like you're treating me as prey. Unfortunately, you're not a qualified hunter. You don't have the ability to catch me." Zhuowen sneered. "Let me go. Otherwise you'll regret it." The water ghost struggled wantonly in Zhuowen's hand. However, Zhuowen's strength was too great. No matter how the water ghost struggled, he could not break free from Zhuowen's grasp. "Let you go? Do you think I'm that stupid?" Zhuowen ignored the water ghost's protests. With a wave of his right hand, the surrounding flames of the sun disappeared. At that moment, the water ghost was in Zhuowen's hand, and the rampaging water pythons had all calmed down. "Tell me the exit out of this world of water," Zhuowen asked calmly. "If I tell you, you won't kill me?" The water ghost said weakly. If you can satisfy me, I can consider letting you live. Zhuowen nodded. The water ghost nodded and pointed at the 10 stone dragon heads around the hall. As long as you destroy all 10 stone dragon heads, the exit will appear. So simple? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. That's all I can tell you. If you don't believe me, then forget it, the water ghost said calmly. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. Then I'll believe you this time. As he spoke, Zhuowen held the water ghost in his right hand. With a stomp of his foot, he instantly arrived above the stone dragon heads in the sky. With a point of his right hand, a terrifying spear shadow swept out. Zhuowen had directly used spear force. Boom! In an instant, the stone dragon head was shattered. Then, Zhuowen did the same to the other 9 stone dragon heads. Bang! 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 After shattering the 10 stone dragon heads, Zhuowen returned to the center of the water and said calmly, "Now it's good. What should we do next?" The water ghost suddenly laughed shrilly. "Human, you're dead. After shattering the 10 stone dragon heads, your doomsday has arrived. The great Ghost King is about to awaken, and you will become the Ghost King's sacrifice." Rumble. The entire hall began to shake intensely after Shui Gui's words sounded. Soon after, Zhuowen's eyes were grave as he discovered that the 10 waterfalls that had gushed out from the 10 stone dragon heads had suddenly separated. They gathered in the air above the middle of the hall and formed a gigantic figure that was dozens of feet large. The figure was azure in color and had bulging muscles. Its huge head had a ferocious expression and 2 huge fangs at the corner of its mouth. It rushed towards the sky, its eyes filled with a bloodthirsty light. "Water Ghost King? You rely on this guy?" Zhuowen asked calmly as he pointed at the Water Ghost King in the sky. "You dare to disrespect my king? You're simply courting death." The water ghost shrieked. "Disrespect?" Zhuowen shook his head. With a point of his right hand, a powerful origin energy turned into a cage, trapping the water ghost inside. Zhuowen took a step and instantly pounced towards the Water Ghost King. Was the Water Ghost King that amazing? His aura was only at the sovereign realm. What did Zhuowen have to fear? "Human, you've got guts. Not only did you not kneel when you saw this king, you actually dared to stand before this king. Could it be that you want to die so badly?" The Water Ghost King's scarlet eyes stared coldly at Zhuowen. After seeing Zhuowen's cultivation, his voice became even colder. A mere sovereign realm human dared to provoke him? Although the Water Ghost King's aura was also at the sovereign realm, his cultivation was actually at the heavenly sovereign realm. However, because he was trapped in the Myriad Beast Grotto, his cultivation was suppressed to the sovereign realm. To the Water Ghost King, a sovereign realm human could be crushed to death with a single palm strike. "The one who wants to die is not me, but you." As he spoke, Zhuowen fiercely punched out. Golden light exploded like a slowly rising sun. The Water Ghost King coldly snorted and punched out as well. This human dared to provoke him. He was simply courting death. He wanted to teach this arrogant human a lesson. Bang! When the 2 fists collided, a terrifying shockwave surged out. Then, the crisp sound of bones breaking rang out. The Water Ghost King's pupils shrank as he retreated. In this exchange, the Water Ghost King was actually at a disadvantage. Even his hand was broken. Die! Zhuowen's aura was like a rainbow. He rushed forward once more. Then his 8 arms hammered down together. A terrifying strength surged out, forming a circular shockwave in the air. The Water Ghost King didn't even know what was going on. Or it could be said that his thoughts were still stuck on why this human was so strong. Zhuowen's attack had already landed. Bang! With a loud explosion, the Water Ghost King didn't even have the chance to make a sound before exploding into a bloody mist under the terrifying power of the 8 arms. My king died just like that. Chapter 986. World of Ice and Snow. The water ghost fell into a daze. Then a cold gaze shot over, causing the water ghost to tremble. His eyes were filled with fear. The human in front of him was too terrifying. The Water Ghost King, whom he revered, was killed just like that. It was too unbelievable. My patience is limited. Where is the exit? When Zhuowen mentioned Shui Gui, the coldness in his eyes became even more intense. There was even an extremely terrifying killing intent in his eyes. The water ghost trembled and immediately surrendered. Powerful human, please spare my life. I am willing to tell you the real exit. You said the same thing just now. Then, you told me the wrong way to release the water ghost king, Zhuowen said indifferently. His meaning was clear. He did not believe the water ghost's words. The water ghost laughed bitterly. Powerful human, I have no need to lie to you. Even the water ghost king was not your opponent. I have no need to lie to you. Then tell me, Zhuowen said indifferently. The water ghost nodded. Then his hands formed a seal. Then, Zhuowen realized that the water below his feet had a cylindrical opening. Inside the opening was a dark tunnel. Powerful human, the exit is below, the water ghost said respectfully. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. He grabbed the water ghost's neck and jumped down. The water ghost was cunning. Zhuowen naturally could not trust him completely. Therefore, he had to bring the water ghost down with him. It would not be too late to release the water ghost after confirming that it was safe. The water ghost was shocked. However, he quickly regained his composure. He knew that the human in front of him would not trust him so easily. Therefore, he did not resist. After entering the opening, Zhuowen walked through the dark tunnel for 15 minutes. Then he arrived in front of an ice door. The ice door was extremely cold. It was bone-chilling. It was extremely terrifying. Powerful human, behind this ice door is a world of ice and snow. Now, do you believe that I did not lie to you? There are several checkpoints behind. If you want to reach the end of the cave, you have to pass through these checkpoints one by one. The water ghost suddenly said. Scram! Zhuowen said coldly as he released the water ghost. The water ghost nodded repeatedly. The moment Zhuowen let go, he immediately slipped away, afraid that Zhuowen would change his mind. At that moment, Zhuowen's attention was all on the ice door in front of him. Naturally, he didn't pay attention to the water ghost's little tricks. Looks like we need to blast open this ice door. Letting out a light breath, Zhuowen spat out a frightening amount of yuan power from his right palm and imprinted it on the ice door. Instantly, traces of cracks appeared on the surface of the ice door before it shattered into countless ice shards. What a powerful cold chi! After the ice door was broken, a bone-chilling coldness surged out, sweeping towards Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen couldn't help but shiver as a look of shock appeared on his face. Whoosh! With a step, Zhuowen entered the ice door. Inside was a world of ice and snow. Goose feather-like snow drifted in this space, piling up a snow road that was several meters thick on the ground. On both sides of the snow road were majestic and magnificent snowy mountains. At the end of the snow road, a huge ice palace appeared in front of Zhuowen. The ice palace was even colder, as if it was the source of the coldness in this world of ice and snow. The coldness in this ice palace is so intense. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as his brows furrowed. This ice palace that stood at the end of this world of ice and snow was very unusual. Boom, boom, boom. On both sides of the snow road, the ice mountains suddenly trembled violently. Then, Zhuowen saw the ice mountains suddenly stand up and transform into ice mountain giants. The originally peaceful world of ice and snow seemed to have started to boil because of the movement of these ice mountain giants. They formed a terrifying snowstorm that wreaked havoc in the air above the snow road. It was an extremely terrifying sight. There are a total of 32 ice mountain giants. Zhuowen stopped on the snowy path and looked at the iceberg giants around him. His eyes were filled with sharpness because the iceberg giants had surrounded him from all directions, sealing off all his paths of retreat and advance. Trespassers of the ice and snow barrier die. Muffled thunderous voices came from the ice giants' mouths. Then, the 32 ice giants roared and rushed towards Zhuowen. Their mountain-like ice fists smashed down, wanting to completely crush Zhuowen to death. Humph! Get lost! Zhuowen bellowed. The fire of the sun surged out and circled around him. It turned into a fire shield, blocking all the attacks from the snow giants around him. However, the power of the snow giants was too great. The combined attack of 32 snow giants was extremely terrifying. Even Zhuowen could not help but feel his blood boil, and his chest felt heavy. Nirvana of the Great Sun. Golden light flashed as Zhuowen transformed into 4 heads and 8 arms. 3 pairs of lightning wings sprouted from his back. He flew out quickly and instantly arrived at one of the ice giants. Boom! Zhuowen's expression was cold and emotionless. Perhaps it was because Zhuowen had taken the initiative to attack, but the snow giant felt that it had been greatly provoked. It immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. With a roar, it threw a punch at Zhuowen. It wanted to smash this human into pieces. Die! Zhuowen was not afraid. He also threw a punch. His whole body was covered in the sun's fire. He looked like a god that had descended to earth. His punch had the strength to lift a cauldron. The 2 fists collided, and an explosion sounded. A ring-shaped air wave rose out of nowhere. The entire snow road seemed to shake a few times under this force. Boom! 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 The other 7 ice giants also roared angrily and arrived at Zhuowen's side in an instant. 7 fists were thrown at Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen's eyes grew colder. The remaining 7 arms blasted towards the surroundings. The strength to lift a cauldron surged out and shook the entire snow world. Resisting 8 ice giants as large as mountains by himself, Zhuowen's might was as vast as that of a god. Crack! A crisp sound rang out, and the 8 snow giants around him let out a mournful cry. Then, they all turned into countless ice cubes and shattered into fine powder. Owa! The remaining 24 snow giants roared in unison when they saw the 8 snow giants around Zhuowen shatter. These 32 ice mountains had stood tall in this world of ice and snow for a long time. They were of the same origin, and were as close as brothers. Now that 8 of their brothers were mercilessly killed by this human, how could they not be angry? Boom! 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 The 24 ice giants rushed out and attacked at the same time. They wanted to tear this despicable human into pieces and avenge their brothers. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Zhuowen's indifferent voice rang out. Then, an even more intense golden light flashed out. Finally, Zhuowen's body grew from 3 feet to 100 feet tall. His huge body was not any weaker than the ice giants. Boom! With a punch, a blazing light surged out. The ice giants closest to him were smashed into pieces before they could even make a sound. Boom! 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 Zhuowen, who had transformed into 100 feet tall, was too terrifying. His strength was much stronger than before. With a punch, the ice giants could not resist at all. In less than 5 breaths of time, the 24 snow giants had all turned into ice and snow powder. As for Zhuowen, he stood in the middle of the snowy road. With a stretch of his hand, the terrifying snowstorm in the sky was actually torn down by him. The entire world of ice and snow regained its calm. Snow Palace. Zhuowen murmured as he looked at the snow palace at the end of the snow road. He took a step and flew towards the snow palace. Whoosh! Arriving in front of the snow palace, Zhuowen looked up at the huge snow palace in front of him. He was shocked. This snow palace was purely made of ice and snow. Moreover, Zhuowen could faintly feel an extremely terrifying chill from the palace. The answer to the exit of the snow world should be in this snow palace. Zhuowen said and entered the palace without hesitation. The front door of the palace was open, and there were no guards. Therefore, Zhuowen easily entered the palace. After passing through the ice corridor, Zhuowen quickly arrived at the hall in the depths of the palace. He saw that there were many ice sculptures in the hall. The sculptures were of humans, beasts, and species that Zhuowen had never seen before. In this quiet hall, they formed a unique scenery. At the front of the hall, there was a throne of ice and snow. On the throne sat a graceful figure. It was a young lady with a crown of ice and snow. Her eyes were green and pure. However, this queen was also a sculpture and not a real person. These sculptures are really ingenious. They are so lifelike. If you don't look carefully, you won't be able to tell that they are sculptures. Staring at the ice sculpture of the queen on the throne, Zhuowen couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. He didn't know which craftsman had carved so many ice sculptures in this snow palace. Moreover, they were so lifelike as if they were real. I don't know if the exit of the snow world is in this snow palace. I have to look carefully. Zhuowen quickly searched the hall. At the same time, his mental energy spread out like a radar. He wanted to find the exit of this palace. Of course, if he could find something good here, Zhuowen naturally wouldn't mind keeping it. There's nothing? After searching the hall, Zhuowen frowned. In this huge hall, other than the mini ice sculptures, there was nothing else. Kid, you still have one place that you haven't searched. Suddenly Xiaohei said to Zhuowen. Hearing this, Zhuowen's gaze also landed on the throne at the front of the hall. There, the pure queen sat quietly on the throne with a scepter in her hand. It was as if she was immortal. This throne was the only place that he hadn't searched. If there was a place where the exit was most likely to be hidden, it would definitely be in this throne. Swoosh. Chapter 987. Ice Queen Zhuowen searched the surroundings of the throne for a long time, but he did not find anything. His brows furrowed tighter and tighter. I didn't find anything? Zhuowen's eyes were filled with helplessness as he returned to the front of the throne. He had searched the entire ice palace, including the surroundings of the throne. However, he still did not find anything. Perhaps the exit is under the throne. Zhuowen's gaze landed on the Ice Queen's body. After a while, he extended his hand in an attempt to lift the Ice Queen statue, which was sitting on the throne, off the ground. However, when Zhuowen's right hand came into contact with the Ice Queen statue's arm, his eyes narrowed. He realized that the right arm of the Ice Queen statue was like a human's arm. It was extremely soft, as though it was not an ice sculpture, but a real person. Although the Ice Queen's arms were soft and weak, the cold air was oppressive. Even Zhuowen found it difficult to withstand the terrifying cold air. What is going on with this ice sculpture? Zhuowen's eyes were filled with bewilderment. Why did an ice sculpture feel like a human's arm? Boom! While Zhuowen was bewildered, a terrifying cold burst out from the Ice Queen statue in front of him. Subsequently, the Ice Queen, who was originally motionless, suddenly moved. The scepter in her hand was filled with cold air, as it heavily smashed onto Zhuowen's chest. Dang dang dang! Zhuowen stepped into the air and retreated dozens of steps. The cold air that swept out from the scepter was like maggots that surrounded him, trying to invade his body. Zhuowen's eyes were dark as he stomped his foot. Flames of the sun swept out and completely eliminated the cold air that was like maggots. After dispelling the cold air, Zhuowen's gaze landed on the throne. At this moment, the Ice Queen statue slowly stood up. Her eyes were emitting a cold, dark green light. Her eyes did not look like a human's eyes. Waves of raging cold air surrounded the Ice Queen. How dare you? How dare you touch my right hand? You are the first one in many years. Now you have two choices. One is to become my boy toy and serve me forever in this ice palace. The other is to die. The queen held the scepter in her hand, and her green eyes stared straight at Zhuowen. No one could tell what the queen was thinking. Crack. At the same time, a series of cracking sounds rang out in the palace. Ice shards fell from the surface of the ice sculptures in the hall. Then, they walked out of the ice sculptures and knelt before the throne. Greetings, Your Highness the Queen. Everyone shouted in unison. Yes, let me introduce you. This is my new male pet. You are not allowed to bully my new male pet in the future. Do you understand? The queen nodded and pointed at Zhuowen with her right hand. Following the words, countless cold gazes gathered on Zhuowen's figure. Zhuowen could sense a hint of coldness and jealousy from the gazes. It was obvious that the identity of the queen's pet had displeased them greatly. Your Highness the Queen, what ability does this weak human have to be qualified to be your new boy toy? Now, I would like to see what this human has to offer. Let's see if he is qualified. A strange creature with the head of a snake and the body of a human walked out from the crowd. Its triangular eyes stared coldly at Zhuowen, and then it attacked directly. A mere human dares to become Her Highness the Queen's pet? You will die without a doubt. The creature with the head of a snake and the body of a human appeared in front of Zhuowen in an instant. It swung its right fist, and countless snake shadows appeared. It was as if there were tens of thousands of snakes rushing out, wanting to tear Zhuowen apart in an instant. In the hall, many creatures had mocking looks on their faces. The strength of this creature with the head of a snake and the body of a human was one of the best among them. It was also a loyal admirer of the queen. Most of the male pets that the queen had chosen before had been killed by this creature. Of course, the actions of this creature with the head of a snake and the body of a human were mostly permitted by the queen. If the male pet that the queen wanted was too weak, he deserved to die. Looking at the creature with the head of a snake and the body of a human, Zhuowen's eyes flashed coldly. This creature with the head of a snake and the body of a human was merely at the initial stage of the Golden Venerate realm. How dare he be so arrogant in front of him? Zhuowen stretched out his right hand and grabbed the fist of the creature with the head of a snake and the body of a human. Then, he twisted his hand, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard. Following the sound of bones cracking, there was a miserable cry. Everyone was shocked to see that the right hand of the creature with the head of a snake and the body of a human was being squeezed by Zhuowen. Under Zhuowen's twisting, the entire right hand was twisted and broken. Then, Zhuowen pulled his right hand and blood spurted out. The creature with the head of a snake and the body of a human let out another miserable cry. His right arm was torn off by Zhuowen. Blood dripped onto the ground and formed a large pool of blood. Zhuowen stepped out with his right foot and stomped heavily on the chest of the creature with the head of a snake and the body of a human. Under the powerful force, the creature with the head of a snake and the body of a human was stomped to the ground by Zhuowen. He spat out another mouthful of blood. In the palace, there was a sudden silence. Everyone stared blankly at the creature with the head of a snake and the body of a human under his foot. Until now, they had not recovered from their shock. The latter had been defeated just like that. Moreover, he had been defeated so thoroughly. The Ice Queen, who was standing in front of the throne, stared at Zhuowen with her green eyes. There was a different look in her eyes. Zhuowen stepped out with his right foot again, stomping heavily on the chest of the creature with the head of a human and the body of a human, as he said coldly and emotionlessly, "With your little bit of strength, you dare to teach me a lesson?" Spitting out another mouthful of blood, the creature with the head of a human and the body of a human was filled with shock. He hurriedly begged, "Spare me. I won't dare to do it again. I won't dare to provoke you again. From now on, you will be the queen's boy toy." The Ice Queen nodded and said indifferently, "Since Protector Snake has begged for mercy, then let him go. Right now you do indeed have the right to be my boy toy." Zhuowen's gaze was calm. He raised his head and stared at the Ice Queen. He sneered, "Boy toy." As he said that, Zhuowen stomped his foot down. A terrifying force crushed down like a mountain. Then the eyes of the creature with the head of a human and the body of a human bulged out. Under this force, he was turned into a bloody mist. The palace fell silent once more. The various creatures in the surroundings all stared at Zhuowen blankly. This human actually dared to disobey the queen right in front of her, and even killed Protector Snake. This human was simply too fearless. "My boy toy, aren't your actions too much?" The Ice Queen's face was dark and sunken. "Too much? This fellow was obviously trying to kill me. If I wasn't strong enough, then I would have become a corpse. Also, when did I say that I wanted to be your boy toy? What right do you have to make me your boy toy?" Zhuowen said provocatively. What joke is this human making? He actually rejected being the queen's boy toy, and even provoked her in front of everyone. Is he asking to die? The surrounding living beings stared at Zhuowen like they were looking at an idiot. If this human's brain wasn't sick, then he shouldn't have said such words. "You don't want to be my boy toy?" The Ice Queen's dark green eyes became incomparably dark and cold. She indifferently stared at Zhuowen. Her voice was as cold as the winter. At the same time, the cold air around her body became more and more terrifying. "Tell me the exit of this world of ice and snow or die." Zhuowen didn't waste any more words. He stepped forward, and the flames of the sun enveloped his body. He instantly pounced towards the Ice Queen on the throne. The terrifying flames of the sun dyed the cold palace with a bit of warmth. The living beings in the palace all distanced themselves from Zhuowen. They were born in the cold, and what they feared the most was the color of the sun, especially the terrifying flames of the sun. "Intruder! Originally, I wanted to give you a way out, and let you become my boy toy to fall into this world of ice and snow forever. Unfortunately, you didn't appreciate it. Since that's the case, then I can only leave you here forever." The Ice Queen said indifferently, A terrifying snowstorm surged out from the entire hall, sweeping up countless amounts of ice and snow, and instantly enveloping Zhuowen. The crying of ice and snow can only be soothed by burial. A murmur sounded out. The terrifying snowstorm actually turned into the shape of a huge ice tomb. Above the snowstorm, a huge ice tombstone that was dozens of feet tall descended and drilled into the snowstorm, wanting to bury Zhuowen in the snowstorm. Zhuowen's gaze was cold. He immediately transformed into 4 heads and 8 arms. He punched towards the sky. Wrapped in layers of flames of the sun, he instantly shattered the falling ice tombstone, turning it into countless ice shards. At the same time, Zhuowen also took out the divine sun cauldron. Endless flames of the sun surged out. The surrounding snowstorm was actually blocked by the flames of the sun. It couldn't hurt Zhuowen at all. Break! 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 Zhuowen roared angrily. The other 7 types of earth fire on his body surged out at the same time, turning into 7 colored flames. Along with the flames of the sun, they spread towards the snowstorm. Bang! 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 Continuous sounds rang out. Then, the surrounding snowstorm immediately dissipated. Zhuowen brought 8 types of flames with him. Stepping on the flames of the sun, he suddenly rushed out towards the Ice Queen. The Ice Queen's expression changed slightly. She didn't expect Zhuowen to be so strong. Moreover, his body actually contained so many terrifying flames. He instantly broke the power of the snowstorm she used. Snowflower. The Ice Queen didn't rush. She raised her scepter again. Countless amounts of cold air turned into snowflowers. These snowflowers bloomed one by one in the air. The cold air they emitted reached a demonic blue color, as if even space was about to freeze. Boom! The 8 types of flames actually stopped when they hit the snowflowers. They were completely blocked outside. Moreover, due to the terrifying cold air of the snowflowers, the 8 types of flames showed signs of being frozen. Fire fusion art, 8 types of earth fire, fuse for me. Chapter 988. 1,000 feet tall body boom boom boom. The 8-colored flame formed by the fusion of 8 different types of flames was too terrifying. The terrifying flame spread throughout the entire space. The pristine snow flowers were roasted by the 8-colored flame and turned into countless drops of snow water. So, as the snowflakes melted, Zhuowen's right palm suddenly struck out. 8-colored flames were added to his right palm, which directly penetrated the wilted snowflakes. Then his right palm, which was covered in flames, landed heavily in front of the queen. The Ice Snow Queen's calm face was filled with shock. How was this human so terrifying? He actually broke her snow flower in an instant. However, the Ice Queen is still calm and unruffled. With a wave of her scepter, countless amounts of ice and snow energy transformed into an ice shield, wanting to block Zhuowen's right palm. Can you block it? Zhuowen said calmly. He punched the ice shield, and the terrifying 8-colored flame surged out. With a cracking sound, the ice shield broke apart and turned into ice shards. Dang dang dang! The Ice Snow Queen's expression changed. She stood up from the throne and retreated. She waved the scepter in her hand, and only then did she cancel out Zhuowen's punch. How are you so strong? The Ice Snow Queen's eyes were filled with frost and her face was filled with shock. Zhuowen stepped in the air and stood on the 8-colored flame. He looked down on the Ice Snow Queen and said, "Tell me the exit of this ice world." The Ice Snow Queen's face was filled with frost and she said coldly, "You don't have the right to know the exit." As she spoke, the Ice Queen raised her scepter again and chanted a mantra. Then, boundless power of ice and snow surged out once more. Then, the entire ice palace started to tremble. Then, Zhuowen felt an extremely powerful pushing force coming from the palace. The pushing force was terrifying and Zhuowen felt that he couldn't resist it. He flew out and was pushed out of the palace. Dang dang dang! Zhuowen's gaze turned grave as he landed on the ground outside the ice palace. At that moment, the huge ice palace had turned into a huge ice giant. This ice giant was close to 1,000 feet tall. It was much stronger than the ice giants formed by the snow mountains on the snow path. So, the Ice Snow Queen held her scepter and stood on the shoulder of the ice giant. Her jade green eyes looked down on Zhuowen and her face was filled with frost. I gave you a chance to be my pet, but you didn't cherish it. You won't have another chance. Standing on the ice giant's shoulder, the Ice Snow Queen's voice was indifferent. Hong! The snow giant roared angrily as its mountain-like fist came crashing down, smashing into the area where Zhuowen was. So, Zhuowen had 3 pairs of lightning wings on his back. He turned into a bolt of lightning and disappeared from where he stood. The ice giant's fist smashed into the area where he stood, creating a crater that was dozens of feet deep. Countless ice shards flew out. You won't be able to escape, the Ice Snow Queen's voice rang out again. The ice giant's attack didn't change, and continued to attack Zhuowen. 1,000 feet tall body. Zhuowen roared, and turned into 1,000 feet tall body, with 4 heads and 8 arms. His eyes were wide open and 8 colored flames surrounded him. He looked like a demon and a god. The snow giant threw a punch, but Zhuowen's 8 arms blocked in front of him. Then he abruptly hugged the giant's fist. Zhuowen only felt a terrifying power that could collapse heaven and earth. Then under this power he continuously retreated. His feet stepped on the ground, leaving 2 deep marks in the ground. He actually blocked it. The Ice Snow Queen's pupils constricted. She looked at the 4-headed, 8-armed Zhuowen, who was trying his best to hug the ice giant's fist. However, this ice giant was close to 1,000 feet tall. Zhuowen's 1,000 feet body was still small and weak in front of it. You're just a mantis trying to stop a chariot. The Ice Snow Queen snorted and smashed her scepter on the ice giant's head. Suddenly, the ice giant's eyes glowed with a demonic blue. It roared and went into a berserk state. Dang dang dang. The ice giant's power increased by a lot. Even though Zhuowen had 4 heads and 8 arms, he was still forced back by this huge power. His blood boiled, and he almost couldn't hold on. 1,000 feet tall body. Zhuowen roared. His entire body was covered in golden light. His body grew 10 times taller, and he became 1,000 feet tall giant. Zhuowen still cultivated the nirvana of the Great Sun, to the limit of the 4th level of Dharma. His limit was to become 1,000 feet tall. There was a 5th level of the nirvana of the Great Sun. It was called undying indestructibility. Zhuowen knew that if he could reach the 5th level of undying indestructibility, his body would become 10,000 feet tall, and he would be able to look down on all living things. However, the 5th level of the nirvana of the Great Sun was too difficult to break through. Zhuowen had broken through to Dharma for some time, but he was still stuck at the edge of the peak of Dharma. However, it was also because of the difficulty of breaking through to undying indestructibility that Zhuowen knew that if he really broke through to the 5th level of nirvana of the Great Sun, then his body and power would undergo a true transformation. It would transform to an extremely perverse state. Of course, all of this was just his guess. He had not come into contact with the edge of undying indestructibility yet. What's wrong with this human? He actually turned into 1,000 feet tall giant? The Ice Snow Queen was stunned. She didn't expect Zhuowen to become so huge. Scram! Zhuowen roared angrily and punched out as well, slamming heavily into the snow giant's right fist. Brute force surged out, causing space to almost completely collapse. Then, Zhuowen's remaining 7 arms did not remain idle either, attacking the snow giant's blind spots from 7 different angles. Boom boom boom. The 7 punches landed on the ice giant's body at the same time, causing the ice giant to wail in pain and retreat. The body that was formed by the power of ice and snow almost collapsed under the terrifying power of the punches. I enjoyed the beating just now. Now it's my turn. His feet landed on the ground and the entire world of ice and snow shook. Then, Zhuowen appeared in front of the ice giant in an instant. He punched the ice giant one after another. Every punch landed on the ice giant's body and golden light burst out. The space exploded and the ice shattered. Gotcha! The ice giant was almost suppressed by Zhuowen. Finally, after receiving more than 50 punches, the ice giant roared into the sky and shattered into pieces of ice. The Ice Snow Queen's face changed, and she retreated a few hundred meters. Her beautiful eyes were filled with shock as she stared at the ice giant that was almost crippled. What happened? Queen, why did the Ice Palace's guardian suddenly collapse? The moment the ice giant shattered, many figures came out from it. Their eyes were filled with fear. When the ice palace turned into a giant, they were all in the hall. However, when the ice giant was being suppressed by Zhuowen, many of the living beings in the palace felt that something was wrong. When the ice giant collapsed, they finally couldn't suppress the fear in their hearts, and they all ran out. Boom boom boom. Boom boom boom. Tell me the exit or all of you will die. Zhuowen, who was 1,000 feet tall, took a few steps forward and looked down at the Ice Snow Queen and the living beings that were surrounded by ice sculptures. The ice palace's guardian was destroyed by this human? How can a mere human be so strong? The living beings looked up at Zhuowen, who was 1,000 feet tall, and their hearts were filled with fear. Zhuowen was 1,000 feet tall, and they were as small as ants in front of Zhuowen. Such a person could kill them all with a slap of his hand. The Ice Snow Queen's heart trembled. This human was too strong. She actually wanted to take him as her pet. Human, if you want to leave this world of ice and snow, you need the scepter in my hand. But you have to promise me that you won't harm us. Looking at Zhuowen's sharp eyes, the Ice Snow Queen submitted. Zhuowen nodded and returned to his normal body. He spread his hands at the Ice Snow Queen and said, "Give it to me. Give me the Ice Snow Scepter, and I will spare your lives." The Ice Snow Queen nodded and respectfully handed the Ice Snow Scepter to Zhuowen. She forced a smile and said, "Human, take the Ice Snow Scepter and follow the snow path. You will see a door. This Ice Snow Scepter is the key to that door." Zhuowen nodded. At the same time, he was a little surprised by the Ice Snow Scepter in his hand. The cold energy within it was extremely terrifying and dense. Zhuowen even suspected that the cold energy within the scepter had surpassed all the Earth-class cold energy. Of course, it still couldn't compare to the Heaven-class cold energy. What a powerful cold energy! Alright, behind this world of ice and snow, how many more checkpoints are there? Zhuowen suddenly asked. The Ice Snow Queen was startled. Soon after, she honestly said, "There are 3 more checkpoints. Only by passing those 3 checkpoints can you smoothly reach the end of the stone cave and obtain the corresponding jade token." Hearing that, Zhuowen pondered for a while. His feet stepped, and he directly flew along the snow path in front of him. His figure instantly disappeared. The Ice Snow Queen and the surrounding creatures all had complicated expressions. One of them sighed. "This human in front of us seems to be much stronger than the humans that came before. He actually defeated the giant guard so easily." The Ice Snow Queen nodded. Soon after, she ordered, "You don't need to care about this anymore. Rebuild the ice palace. We will continue to sleep and wait for the next challenger." Whoosh! At the end of the snow path, a figure instantly flew over. Soon he stopped in front of a huge stone door. This stone door was 10 zhang wide. Its surface was filled with mottled traces of time. It looked very ancient. In front of the stone door, there was a groove. It should be something like a keyhole. Looks like the Ice Snow Scepter should be the real key to this stone door. Let's give it a try. Chapter 989. Absorbing the Sea of Magma. What a terrifying temperature. Zhuowen's pupils shrank as he involuntarily took a few steps back. With a wave of his sleeve, Zhuowen immediately dispersed the heat that was invading from behind the stone door. Soon after, Zhuowen's gaze converged on the world behind the stone door. This was a terrifying world filled with magma and flames. As far as the eye could see, there was a suspended stone bridge above this world of magma. Moreover, the surface of the stone bridge was covered with traces of cracks. Between the cracks, streams of magma flowed. At the end of the suspended stone bridge, there was an island suspended in mid-air. At the end of the island, there was an empty door. Zhuowen knew that the empty door was the exit of this world of magma. I wonder what dangers exist in this world of magma. Zhuowen muttered to himself. Just as he was about to step out, the Saint Ice rune in his left hand suddenly flickered, attracting Zhuowen's attention. Looking at the flickering Saint Ice rune, a puzzled look appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. He did not know what was going on with the Saint Ice rune. Why did something so strange happen? However, Zhuowen soon found out the reason. he saw a hexahedral ice crystal fly out from the Saint Ice rune. With a swoosh, it flew towards the ice scepter in the keyhole of the stone door. A 10,000-year mysterious soul ice parasite larva? Zhuowen's pupils shrank as he recognized the identity of this strange ice crystal with a single glance. Back then, Zhuowen had placed the 10,000-year mysterious soul ice parasite larva in the space of the Saint Ice rune to be nurtured. After all, the cold qi within the Saint Ice rune was extremely powerful, and the environment was extremely suitable for the growth of the 10,000-year mysterious soul ice parasite larva. Zhuowen had placed the larva inside with the intention of giving it a try. If it could really hatch, it would naturally be for the best. After all, the mysterious soul ice butterfly had great potential. If it was nurtured well, it could definitely advance to the terrifying Fey Emperor realm. Originally, Zhuowen had thought that it would take at least 1 or 2 years for the mysterious soul ice butterfly to hatch. However, he did not expect that the 10,000-year mysterious soul ice parasite larva would suddenly undergo a change today. With a step, Zhuowen arrived behind the stone door. He saw that the ice crystal had actually absorbed into the ice scepter. The 10,000-year mysterious soul ice parasite larva hidden within the ice crystal made a strange sizzling sound. Next, Zhuowen's sharp senses discovered that the larva was actually beginning to absorb the powerful cold qi within the ice scepter. This frost scepter is good for larvae? Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he muttered to himself in surprise. Of the 10,000-year mysterious soul ice butterfly parasite larva's larva, was the mysterious ice larva of the 10,000, was. Kid, I'm afraid that the 10,000-year mysterious soul ice parasite larva is about to hatch. Kid, hurry up and drip your blood on it. If you wait until the larva has completely hatched, it will be too late. Seeing that Xiaohe was so cautious, Zhuowen hurriedly bit his thumb and dripped a drop of blood on the surface of the ice crystal. The drop of blood was then absorbed by the ice crystal. The larva's green eyes turned blood red, looking even more bizarre than before. However, with a thought, Zhuowen discovered that there was an additional consciousness in his sea of consciousness. This consciousness was very unfamiliar, and it seemed to be very dependent on Zhuowen. It was like a baby beast crying piteously for food. This consciousness belongs to the 10,000-year mysterious soul ice parasite larva? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Nonsense. Other than the larva, who do you think it belongs to? You should put away the mysterious soul ice butterfly parasite larva first. Let it absorb for a while, and then it will be able to hatch the mysterious soul ice butterfly. Xiaohe continued. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. With a thought, he put the mysterious soul ice butterfly parasite into his spirit ring. The 10,000-year mysterious soul ice butterfly parasite was firmly attached to the mysterious soul ice butterfly parasite, tirelessly absorbing the powerful ice energy in the mysterious soul ice butterfly parasite. After dealing with the 10,000-year mysterious soul ice parasite larva, Zhuowen stepped into the world of magma. The temperature of this world of magma was indeed terrifying. Even Zhuowen felt his face and ears turn red. His forehead was burning. I have to get out of this world of magma as soon as possible. Zhuowen's eyes were faintly red. This was a reaction caused by the high temperature. Fortunately, he had the sacred ice rune. Although he still felt very hot, it was much better than before. This suspended stone bridge is very dangerous. Moreover, in this world of magma, the gravity is hundreds of times stronger than the outside world. Even if you use 3 pairs of lightning wings, I'm afraid that your speed will be very slow. Xiaohe said solemnly. Zhuowen nodded. The moment he stepped into the world of magma, he had already felt the terrifying gravity of this world. This gravity was like a mountain crushing his body, causing his waist to bend, and he almost could not stand up straight. Fortunately, he had cultivated the nirvana of the great sun, so the strength of his physical body was extraordinary. Boom, boom, boom. The moment Zhuowen stepped onto the stone bridge, the magma below turned into fiery pythons and swept towards Zhuowen, wanting to devour Zhuowen completely. Zhuowen's complexion slightly changed. He exerted a palm power from his right hand, and a terrifying yuan power poured out. It immediately blocked the magma fire python outside. However, there were too many magma fire pythons. Zhuowen was overwhelmed. Kid, your sacred fire rune can control all the flames in the world. You don't need to block the flames of magma. Use your sacred fire rune to control the flames of magma. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly sounded, causing Zhuowen's eyes to brighten. He nodded and the sacred fire rune in his right hand shone with a blazing light. Then, with the help of the sacred fire rune, the fiery pythons that rushed out from the sea of magma below stopped in their tracks. Tens of thousands of fire pythons came to a stop above Zhuowen. Then they started circling around Zhuowen. It was as though they were protecting him. The flames of magma in this world of magma were quite powerful. If he could absorb them into the sacred fire rune, it would be a very powerful method. Zhuowen suddenly had an idea. He pinched his right hand, and with a thought, a powerful suction force came from the sacred fire rune. Then, the fiery pythons that were circling around Zhuowen's body all rushed into the sacred fire rune in his right hand. Absorb all of them. The magma in this world of magma was very powerful. Zhuowen naturally would not let it go. He simply released the sacred fire rune and began to let it absorb the sea of magma below the stone bridge. The sacred fire rune was indeed powerful. Although the magma in this world of magma was extraordinary, it was a pity that it was still insufficient in front of the sacred fire rune that could control all flames in the world. Boom, boom, boom. The sea of magma below the stone bridge began to boil. In the middle of the sea of magma, terrifying waves of magma began to sweep out. The magma storm soared into the sky, crossed the stone bridge, and descended above Zhuowen. Then, under the suction force of the sacred fire rune, all of it rushed into the sacred fire rune. The entire sea of magma began to boil. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with madness. He completely released the sacred fire rune and allowed it to absorb the sea of magma. Kid, this sea of magma is too vast. You can't absorb it all. Xiao Hei frowned. Not necessarily, Zhuowen said. Then with a stomp of his foot, he jumped down from the stone bridge and rushed toward the sea of magma below. Zhuowen knew that if the sea of magma was completely absorbed into the sacred fire rune, it would greatly increase his combat strength. This madman! Xiao Hei was somewhat helpless. However, he also followed Zhuowen and dived down. Since this kid wanted to go crazy, then he would accompany him. Zhuowen landed on top of the sea of magma. The power of the sacred fire rune gushed out and formed a huge whirlpool in the middle of the sea of magma. Zhuowen followed the whirlpool and dived to the bottom of the sea of magma. His right hand slammed on the ground at the bottom. The sacred fire rune was blazing to the extreme. The sea of magma began to boil, and countless huge waves were set off. Absorb all of it, Zhuowen roared. The rune of the sacred fire rune slowly spread from the back of Zhuowen's right hand to Zhuowen's entire body. The surrounding magma flowed into the sacred fire rune around Zhuowen's body. He actually spread the sacred fire rune all over his body to increase the area of magma absorption. This kid is smart. No wonder he jumped down from the stone bridge. Looking at this scene, the worry in Xiao Hei's eyes disappeared and was replaced by admiration. The sea of magma raged for a full hour. After an hour, the sea of magma had completely disappeared, leaving only the barren riverbed. Zhuowen stood quietly at the bottom of the riverbed. The sacred fire rune around his body was suffused with a fiery glow. It looked extremely strange. However, the sacred fire rune slowly faded and gathered on the back of Zhuowen's right hand. Whoosh! Xiao Hei came to Zhuowen's shoulder and praised. I didn't expect you to use such a method to absorb the sea of magma. This is somewhat beyond my expectations. Zhuowen grinned and said, I thought of it in a flash. This sea of magma is very terrifying. If I release all of it, even an early-stage heavenly venerable expert would find it difficult to resist. Yes, this sea of magma is indeed much more powerful than ordinary magma. Moreover, you have absorbed the entire sea of magma into the sacred fire rune. Its power is really terrifying. Xiao Hei nodded in agreement. The sea of magma has disappeared, and so has the powerful gravitational force. It seems that the gravitational force in the sea of magma is all thanks to this sea of magma. Now we should leave this world of magma. As Zhuowen spoke, He stomped his foot and jumped back onto the stone bridge. His entire body passed through the stone bridge like a ghost. Soon, he arrived at the floating island at the end of the stone bridge. There was nothing on the island. Zhuan searched for a while and lost interest. He left the island and stepped into the void gate in front of the island. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.